Hello everyone, and welcome to this Nintendo Life episode 132. We're in December, Bally. It's the end of the year, game of the year time. The bells are ringing, everyone's
such
happy.
a good time for games.
It is.
It's the
awesome.
best time to be playing games.
The Game Awards happened, Kind of Funny did their showcase, lots of things got announced. Holy shit, Joker from Persona 5 is coming to Smash Brothers. My god, I am so excited. That sounds like, right now, I feel very positive about the future of Smash Brothers DLC, because you know when they said that, like, Nintendo were going to be saying, we're going to make the final choice here on the Smash DLC, Sakurai's not doing it anymore, Nintendo made the decision, and we're all like, great, that means they're going to promote, like, Luigi's Mansion, they're going to, another Fire Emblem character, it's going to be boring as hell. Guess what? They fucking put a Persona 5 character, a game that's not even on the Nintendo system yet. This feels like another Sony betrayal, just like Snake, just like Cloud. This is like the third stab into Sony, and it feels good. It's awesome. I'm very excited. But Bally, how are you feeling at the moment after all the announcements of the Game Awards and things like that?
Yeah, the Game Awards were great. I think there's a lot of cynicism about them floating around, and
yeah,
that's always fair. It can always be improved. While it's very long, it also skirts over some awards very fast, and
right,
which is strange.
and it feels bad because there are some awards like sound design and things like that don't get the props that they should. And a lot of those folk who just are never going to get the spotlight anyway still get shafted, and they're the kind of people who are working those stupid hours that everyone is very frustrated.
And
by.
I can appreciate that speech after speech can get stale very quickly, and that it's very clear that Jeff has tried to make sure that that's all streamlined, where there's only a few speeches, and
it's weird how the show's 4 hours long and still feels like they skip over some stuff, you know.
But there's just so many ads. But I mean, that's how the whole thing's funded,
right?
So,
but that's how they pay for it, That's how you make the money. You got to have as many advertisements as possible.
So I think overall, it's still really high level. You can really see that winning these awards means a great deal to these people. It's been around a long enough time now where it is a big deal. Like, the Game Awards has become a really big thing, and it's like, I remember the criticism, Jeff Kanata, I think back in the day, he had a criticism that Game Awards, they were always a bit casual and could never hit the mainstream audience, and the Game Awards does feel like a step up. Like, it is more formal, it is suits and ties, it is professional, it looks really, it's working out well, and I love the announcements that come from it. I thought the winners were all legitimate winners. We were just talking about Spider-Man got a bit shafted, but that always happens to someone. So, but yeah, overall, it's a great showcase of video games, and I hope it'll keep going for the future. Yeah, because it's good.
Right, and keep getting better. And I think actually one of my favourite moments of the night was when Sean Layden, Phil Spencer, and Reggie walk out on stage together.
And announce
the big
nothing.
three companies, obviously, but like it's one of those dream scenarios of like, what if the big three like come together and do something, and they didn't do anything, but it is cool to see everyone put down their guns for the night and be like,
I like how they're
amicable, and
they're all like white men of a certain age with like a certain build. Like
Reggie's not, but obviously
Reggie's a bit taller, right? But they've all got a bit of a belly, and then they wear the casual t-shirt.
I mean, Reggie's not a white man, is what I'm
that's that's true as well. But as in, like, they've all got like a bit of a belly, and they wear the casual tee with the jacket on top.
And they're all very tall as well. Actually, Phil Spencer quite a bit shorter than the other two, so I think that's why he was in the middle. It's just like to create that balance a little bit. But yeah, it's neat to see that, and I enjoyed it. So good stuff there. Obviously, the Nintendo announcement that people were speculating about Metroid Prime didn't happen. Reggie was wearing a big-ass Ridley t-shirt, teasing again. Like, constantly Reggie with the Metroid teases, and yet nothing ever comes of them. But I think that they did steal the night. Works quite well for Persona because the Phantom Thieves. But that announcement was definitely the biggest thing I think people were talking about afterwards, aside from the awards and what won Game of the Year and things like that. So Nintendo actually had a pretty good night, and they had another a couple of announcements where Mortal Kombat is coming to Switch, as well as Crash Team Racing is now going to be releasing on Switch and Xbox and PS4 at the same time. And then they also had Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, which is a Switch exclusive. So some cool things for Nintendo happening, and good times. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to roll into this new year, and I wonder how long it'll be until we get a new Direct, when they're going to drop the next reveal of the next Smash character, when Joker is even going to come out. I'd imagine like April or something, probably a little bit away at this point in time.
Yeah.
But
do you think we'll get 3 in the year of 2019, 2 in the year?
Yeah, I mean, Prawn Plant's going to be start of the year.
But we don't know about.
They said it's all going to be out by February of 2020, so
wow. Okay.
they actually have to release quite a lot in a short period of time. So hopefully every few months we'll see a new character, which will be very exciting. And just judging by what Reggie said, it's like, you know, you should take this as a pattern for what the DLC will be like, which is very exciting. Yeah, it's so much better than what we expected. Anyway, we're here to talk about video games and Nintendo and all that stuff. Bally, do you want to tell everyone what we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. So for the first segment, we're just going to share our thoughts on Smash Brothers Ultimate with what we have been playing. And then an extended second segment, it's Game of the Year. It's top 10 games of the year that didn't actually come out this year. That's the theme for the second segment. And we've got a few of your lists that you've sent in for that segment as well.
Absolutely. So that's going to be a big beefy one. So despite the fact that I've been playing a ton of Dead Cells and Valkyria Chronicles 4, and I know that, Bally, you finished Astrobot, we're just going to focus in here because Smash Brothers is the thing of the moment. I'm going to talk about our experiences so far. So I don't know how much I've played. I feel like it's a good amount, maybe like 5-6 hours total. And yeah, dug in quite a bit to it. How much do you think you've got?
Probably only about 2-3 hours, including a bit of online with you and just the single player. Yeah.
How are we feeling so far about Smash Brothers, Bally?
You just have to cut it into different segments, I think. If you're the word ultimate, I think, is a great description of the character roster, the amount of music in the game, the number of stages.
Right.
While there aren't many new stages, it's a very impressive ultimate number of returning stages. But then when you look at the single player and the lack of, like we said before, trophies and what the spirits actually are and how they operate and stuff, I just can't use the word ultimate to describe that experience. And it's a bit lacking on that side so far, which is a real shame. But single player and Smash Brothers have always been difficult
they've always been at odds with each other, because ultimately Smash Brothers is a multiplayer game first, and it will always be why I enjoy it the most. So the single player offerings are always kind of a side thing that I dabble in, but I think the thing that has gone for me and the spark that I had before is, without trophies, there's not a lot of incentive for me to do a lot of these things.
There was such a core through the whole game, because no matter what mode you would delve deep in, you'd get a trophy for it,
or you get some coins that you could spend in the shop.
Right. And it's that I was prepared to give spirits the benefit of the doubt, because I was saying this off mic before, but trophies were great for two reasons. One was, hey, this is a cool 3D model that we can spin around and look at and take pictures of. But B, you get descriptive text that says, hey, this is what this game is, what this which game it's from, the history of it, the system it came out on, that kind of thing.
The year it came out.
Like all just great Nintendo history lore that I absolutely
love. It made
Smash
Brothers a museum.
Right.
Which is what I always loved it for, aside from the fighting game nature of it, is that it's a celebration of the history of Nintendo.
And if the Nintendo were going to say, right, well, we're going to go for spirits, they are JPEGs, but alongside those, you'll still get your, like a catalog where it'll archive everything, where it'll say, this is the game it's from, and this is the year it came out, and here's a description. At the moment, all you get is the picture, the JPEG, and the series it's from. No year, no history, no descriptive text. And that, for me, is a huge, huge shame, personally.
Yeah, it definitely makes me less willing to do a lot of the different modes. But I guess we can kind of dig into some of it. We started on World of Light, which is the adventure mode. And from what a lot of people have said, It doesn't really have any cutscenes. It may have some like at the end, I guess, or maybe in the middle, but it's just a big ass world map where you go around and you fight a bunch of different battles against these quote unquote spirits. And what I will say so far is that I have thought the way they have implemented the characteristics of the different spirits into the game has been pretty smart. There are a couple that I've come across which have been like, oh, that is something that I wouldn't have thought of, how well they could implement that idea of that character in a fight, and yet it works perfectly well. So the best example I found so far is Rhine from Xenoblade Chronicles, who obviously I'm just going to use him forever because he's the best. You fight against a Ryu who has like the orange suit on, so it's a similar look to Rhine, and Ryu is kind of the same build as Rhine, like a big kind of buff dude. He has super armor, but moves slower because, like, Rhine is a tank. It's a timed stamina battle, so, like Xenoblade, like, there's health that you have to tick down. And then he also loves to taunt, which is because Rhine just says all this bullshit during battles. All the Xenoblade characters do, obviously. But it's really funny that they've taken all these characteristics, and with the variety of things that you can do in Smash Brothers, including items and making people big and small and changing costumes and just having little variations on them. Like, in the past, I used to play Special Smash with our friend Ali T all the time. We'd be like, oh, let's go Curry Metal Bunny mode and just do all this madness. Through all of those modifiers, they can actually do quite a wide variety of things. So, for example, another one was Rabid Kong, which was a white Donkey Kong with the bunny ears on, and I was like, that's perfect. Like, it's Rabid Kong from Mario versus Rabbids, or Mario plus Rabbids, and it was on the New Super Mario Brothers 2 stage with the coins, so it was like a Mushroom Kingdom setting. And I was like, okay, they have figured out a way to get this character, who isn't actually in this game, kind of in this game, and acting in a way that is similar to how he would act in his actual game, which I have thought that the fact that there are so goddamn many of these, there's like over 1,000 spirits, and that each match that you fight is unique, and that they have thought about it. Like, that one for Ryan is perfect. Someone had to think about like all the options to do for that match, and that's 1 out of like 1,000, which is very, very impressive. And I thought it's been better than I have expected so far.
Yeah, it's cool, and I am enjoying it. World of Light, I should say. I am. The things that people are saying about the length of this mode being like 20 to 40 hours and or more, and I do worry that maybe after about, I don't know, 10 hours, I'm not going to be that into it anymore, and it might wear thin a little bit. And I just hope that it'll keep me engaged and be like, oh, this is really cool, let's unlock this, or there has been just enough cutscenes to keep me vaguely interested, or I don't know. But I am scared that it'll run out of legs, but we'll see.
Yeah, that'll burn out for sure, because it really is just an overworld map with nothing else aside from these places to go. And like, sometimes you'll unlock a character, and I've come across so far, there's one thing which is you go down into the caves, and what you do is you take a bunch of your random spirits and just send them off, and it's like a real-time fucking mobile waiting game. They did this in Xenoblade 2, I've seen it in Metal Gear Solid 5, but it's like, take a bunch of, like, it's in these games where you have a bunch of things that some of them you're using, most of them you're not. In Xenoblade 2, it was all of your blades that were random ones. In Metal Gear, it's all of your soldiers, because you collect soldiers from the battlefield and send them to your base. And in this, it's spirits, and you can basically send them off on an adventure on their own to go and collect random shit, which is basically just like, hey, here's a really long timer for like 6 hours, then just check back in on it and you'll get some free stuff. So you collect...
What's that mode called?
It's not a mode. It's in World of Light. You'll find places like, I think there's a gym, there's a cave, there's loads of these different places that you can find.
Right, it's actually in World of Light. Okay.
Yes, and so within World of Light, you send some of your like low-level spirits who you're not really using at the moment in there, and they will accumulate stuff. And so far, in terms of using the spirit, it's definitely been one of those things where I just go into the menu and just press auto pick, because I just want the thing that works best for that fight and not have to manage it. The thing that frustrates me a little bit is that some of the primary spirits, which is like the main one, have areas where you can like slot in secondary ones, and when you go through the primary ones and auto pick, sometimes those aren't filled in. It would be nice if, for example, like if I had one that was resistant to fire floors, so I wouldn't take damage from fire floors, that I could have that slot in automatically, and it hasn't really done that for me yet. I have to like do it a bit more manually, so I wish that was a bit more streamlined, but it isn't really something that I get that excited about. The thing that I like is finding characters that I have an affinity for. So on the Spirit Boards mode, which is separate from World of Light, where you basically just fight a bunch of different spirits, I've been like, ooh, that's a cool character that I know that I want to get. And then afterwards, I'm kind of like, well, I have them now. What do I do? Like, there's not much else to enjoy about them other than the fact that, like, oh, I'm collecting all the Xenoblade characters, or I'm collecting, these people from Shovel Knight or something like that.
Because there's no joy in, there's not as much joy in going back through your spirit collection and being like, oh, I have all these spirits, because, like I was saying before, there's no 3D model, there's no description of the game they're from. You can't really do much with them. It's just a bit.
No,
feels really. It's just such a strange decision for this game, Smash Brothers Ultimate.
100% feels like quantity over quality, which is what it is. It's just like, let's represent every aspect of Nintendo possible, but we can't make that many assets. Like, it's impossible to just do that for all these characters. So, I don't know, let's just find artwork from their existing games and just chuck it in there, because that's the easiest way to represent what we have. And yeah, it's like I'm going through the collection. I'm like, what is it? Like, this doesn't do anything for me, and that's it's a shame. But I do get a bit of joy from seeing a character in World of Light and being like, I wonder how they represent this character. Like, I just came across Sakura from Fire Emblem. I think it's Fates, and it's from Birthright. And she is represented by like an Isabelle who's in like a similar costume and has things that like would be represented of Fire Emblem. I'm like, okay, that's a cool way of fitting everything in and making it make sense. But yeah, not a huge fan. How have you felt about classic mode so far?
I've not actually tried classic mode yet.
Have you not?
No,
oh my goodness.
I've just been doing World of Light, but I have read things, and you've described sort of like the way that it's kind of innovative in the way that it comes up with a theme around a specific character and how to fight a number of characters in and around that theme, which is cool.
Right. Yeah, it's very neat. And I think that the thing that sets it apart is, first of all, it's a lot faster than going through Wii U or 3DS classic mode. It just trims a lot of the fat. It speeds through the battles much better pace. And secondly, they have multiple different bosses that you fight at the end. If they are a boss that is from a particular series, then obviously you're going to fight that one at the end. And so some of them, like we saw Dracula from the trailers. I just fought Dracula with Simon Belmont, and it feels really cool because the way you damage Dracula is just like you do in the original game, where if you try and hit him on his body, it does nothing. You have to hit him on his head. And it felt like I was playing Castlevania when I was fighting him, because I was just using my whip to hit his head while I'm jumping and being airborne, using the boomerang and the sub-weapons. It was really cool, and I like the setup for it. Some of them are not great because they can get frustrating. So for Zelda and Link, the boss is Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time, and with Zelda you fight Ganondorf and then he transforms into the big ass final boss of Ocarina of Time, who in the original game the only way you can damage him is by hitting his tail. The frustrating thing is that that's the only way you can damage him here as well, which means that either you have to like jump over him to get to the other side, which is difficult to do because he keeps jumping around, and you can't roll through his legs, which I thought, like, hey, that's how you beat him in the original game, is fucking roll through his legs and like use the weapon on his tail to take him down. But it doesn't let you dodge roll underneath him, so his fight in particular was a tough one, and it just takes forever because his health bar is quite large and you can only damage him at that one particular point. So
that is cool that is in there, because, you know, like the same with Dracula, like,
yeah, it's awesome. And like the stage itself is like the final battle of Ocarina of Time. It's on that same arena. It's like fire everywhere.
Oh, it's like a new stage.
Yeah, basically. But
that's
all those
cool.
stages for the boss fights, like the one we saw in the trailer with Rathalos, like that stage isn't actually a stage in the game because it's just a flat area. But all of those areas, like the Dracula fight takes place in a more flat place with the throne room. So none of those are actual stages in the game. They're only used for those boss fights in particular. But yeah, I've fought Rathalos, I fought Dracula, I fought Master Hand, obviously, who's a classic, and I fought, who I just said, Ganon, the big Ganon from End of Ocarina of Time. And it's neat that they change the way those things work, that every fighter is going to have a different final boss. And the way it worked for Marth, who was the first one I went through on classic mode, was Marth is going to fight a bunch of dragons. And I'm like, okay, can you really pull that off, game? Are you able to have 6 fights where I feel like I'm fighting dragons? And surprisingly so, because you fight Corrin, who obviously is a dragon, that's the core to that character, has like dragon DNA. You fight against King K. Rool, who's kind of like a big dragony thing. You fight against a large Charizard. You fight against Ridley. You fight against a bunch of Mii fighters who have like dragon costumes and shit on. So they really do a good job of, like, when I was going through Zelda's, one of the fights was against 3 Mii fighters who were dressed up as the what you call them from Breath of the Wild, the Yiga clans.
Oh wow,
people. Cool. And I was like, oh, this is neat, and it's taking place on a Zelda stage, and just like what they did in the Spirits Board and in World of Light, it feels like they are paying far more attention to what each character would be represented by and how they could use all the variety of stuff they have in the game to twist on it. So that's neat, and I've enjoyed going through classic mode despite the fact that at the end all I get is a JPEG instead of a trophy. The thing, there's a little neat thing that I like as well, which frustrated me in the old games, is once you've beaten classic mode, each character portrait gets a little medal next to them, so you can see which characters you've beaten with classic mode and not. Whereas in the past, I had to go back through my trophy collection to see, have I beaten this one? Because even if you fail on classic mode, it gives you a score, and I never knew if I had actually gotten that character or not, because the score wasn't a good representation of whether I'd beaten it or not with that particular person. So yeah, classic mode so far has been fun to go through, and I would say that that's kind of the core. Like, when you talk about the core single player stuff, it's pretty much those two things. And all these people who have been saying, oh my god, this game is full of content, I honestly am struggling to find it. I really don't see that there is much beyond that. Like the Mob Smash stuff, where you do Century Smash where you fight 100 characters, All-Star has just been gutted. Now it's basically just a 100-man melee, where you just fight every single character in the game on one stage and they just keep reappearing. It's nowhere near as good as it used to be. And obviously it wasn't an amazing thing, but at the end of All-Star, you got the final Smash trophy, which was a fucking great reward for going through the gauntlet of every character. And now it's just like, I don't know, just put it in 100-man melee. And the lack of break the target, the lack of home run contest, any other, classic Smash Brothers mode that was a way for you to jump around and have some variety, means that most of my time I've been jumping between classic mode and World of Light. And I don't think there's a lot else to do. Have you had a look at like the challenge board with the things that you can like go for specifically and stuff like that yet?
Well, you kind of like when I receive like an award for completing a challenge, I've seen it then, but I've not gone
right.
Back
You haven't gone and checked it to
like
particularly go for stuff.
Yeah. No,
so I have been looking at it quite a bit, because some of them are specific ones that I want to know. So for example, when you go through classic mode as King K. Rool, there's a bonus game and you have to finish it within 45 seconds. And I know I just want to go through classic mode once with everyone. So with King K. Rool, once I unlocked him, I just did that and I was able to like focus in on it. So I'm keeping track of some of these different ones so that I can do them along the way. That has really been the thing that has been directing me in terms of what I'm playing, because without the trophy carrot on the stick, it's more about completing the board and opening up every panel and things like that. And actually, one of the funny things is, on the board, the hammers that you get that you can use to smash ones you don't want to do.
Yeah.
Some of the ones that are really fucking hard that you would want to use it on, such as clear classic on 9.9 intensity, it doesn't let you. It bans you from smashing that one, so you actually have to do that one yourself, which I don't know if I will be able to do, because let me tell you, some of those bosses at the end, fighting them on 9.9 sounds like a goddamn nightmare. Ganon especially, like Jesus. But yeah, that's that's how I've really been directing my time with it so far.
And we've played a little bit of online together.
Yeah, and have you got any of the new characters yet? Is there anyone that you've been able
I've
to mess around
unlocked
with?
K. Rool, but I've not used him yet. So
You just unlocked K. Rool, okay. And obviously for you, people like Cloud and Bayonetta will be new because you never owned the
and
DLC.
Ryu, I've unlocked him, yeah.
Have you tried him yet at all?
No. I've just been Mario and Samus to unlock the characters. They're my two mains that I'm just plowing through trying to unlock everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend just jumping around different characters. I really like playing as Zelda in this game so far. She looks awesome. I think the new design for Zelda is amazing, but I've enjoyed playing through quite a few different modes with her.
She's got a real delay on her. What's the
Knight
thing? The Knight that comes out
from Spirit Tracks. Yeah,
from Spirit Tracks. There's like a huge delay on it now, and then maybe it's more powerful. But there's also you can hold smashes much longer.
I was just about to say that. Yes, it's so weird to me that you can just hold a smash forever, because one of the things
forever?
that you... Well, I don't know if it is forever, but I've held it for what seems like an infinite amount of time.
Yeah, it's a really long time.
And I remember like playing you on Wii U, and the way that with Mario you'd hold your smashes, and I'd have to, if I was greedy, I'd run in and you'd get me. But usually I just wait for it to dissipate and then run in.
You're gonna have to change your strategy.
Now if you just hold it forever, it's just like, oh man, now I have to think differently about how this works and get into it a bit more. But yes, we have played online. The first match I played online was just a random one to see, and it was with 4 players with items. It was the laggiest thing I've ever played in my life. It was a bunch of bullshit and awful. And then, likewise, the first night we had the game, when it came out, we played online, and it was unplayable. It was just awful, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm paying for this service, and this is a garbage fucking truck. This is nowhere close to what it should be for a service that you put money into. It's the same as... It was worse than Wii U in a lot of elements.
Yeah.
And was not fun whatsoever. And we jumped in today and played some, or last night, sorry, and played some, and it was better, still laggy, still not the experience that it should be, but it's still Smash Brothers, and I'm still having fun with it, so.
Yeah, it was a way off being perfect last night, but it was actually, you could actually throw a punch and it would land at the right time, and that sort of thing, but yeah, it just wasn't smooth. And like you said, if we're now paying money for this service, you gotta, what are we getting for that? It needs to be a step up, and maybe it was smoother because it was the day after launch rather than the day of launch. I don't know, or maybe it was just because I moved like between different Wi-Fi routers. So I don't know, but it was a bit better.
Yeah, and we had some good matchups. I really enjoy using these new characters against you because you have no idea what the fuck they're going to do.
And they throw a lot of stuff at you, like a special, like Isabelle, Simon Belmont. King K. Rool just seems crazy powerful.
He's really good. He's
so
really
good.
damn good. I like the fact that he has range with his crown. And the funny thing is, if his crown doesn't get back to him, it falls on the stage as an item. And at one point, you picked it up and tried to throw it at me.
Oh, that's what that was. Because I was like,
yes.
I thought this was a no items match. What did I just pick up?
Yes, so that's King K. Rool's crown that you can pick up, and then you missed me with it, and I picked it back up, and he puts it back on his head. It's a very neat touch, but that's a cool like ranged attack that he has. He also has a counter, which I'm always a big fan of. His general like recovery is really good because it's just the helicopter, and it's not like it leaves you open obviously, but it means that if you're really far off the stage you can get back with him, which is usually not the case for a lot of heavyweight characters, so he has that up his sleeve. Just really powerful like big boxing glove punch. He's great, and his down tilt as well, like jams you into the ground like a pitfall seed, which you can then follow up on. So he was a lot of fun to play as, and I was just destroying you with him, which was great. And then Isabelle was hilarious because she has her side B, which is using a fishing pole. And you was playing a Donkey Kong, and usually with Donkey Kong, if there's like a weaker character that takes less hits to KO, you just smash me with them, and I have a really hard time. But with Isabelle, I don't know, I was just dancing around you with some nonsense and using the fishing pole to grab you every time and just chuck you away. It was really good, and I enjoyed playing as her quite a bit, which I didn't expect because she wasn't like one of those characters I was anticipating that much going into.
And she
this
is
game.
Completely different to Villager. It's not like
she definitely has a lot of similar elements. Like there's pulling
turnip thing. thing.
Her standard B, her turnip, her B, where you take an item into you. Her recovery is similar. It's obviously like a swing as opposed to balloon, but it's a same idea, I guess. And she has a few different things. Like her aerial, side aerial is using the slingshot as well. So it's not an Echo character because there are a lot of different things that she does. And she's unique enough, and I think she's a lot of fun to play as. And then there's Inkling, who I've played as not as much. It was the first new character to unlock, and Inkling's a hard one to get your head around because it relies so much on managing how much ink you have left. And one of the annoying things is if you don't have a good opportunity or a moment to refill your ink, then you have to fill it up like a tiny little bit, and then you don't have as much ink to use still, and then it runs out, and then you have... So it's this weird situation where if you only get a little bit of ink back, then it screws you over because you can't duck down again and keep filling it up, because the only time you can fill up your ink is when you've run out of it. So if you've run out of it, you only get a little bit back, then you can't just go back and refill straight away again. You have to
reward, like
right. You have to use up the tiny bit that you've just got, then go down again, which is frustrating.
It kind of defeats the whole point of Splatoon. The whole point was you could top up whenever you wanted, like your ink.
Right. And maybe there is a way to do that I just haven't figured out yet because I haven't looked into it as much, and it's a brand new character. But there are some neat moves there. Use the roller, the paintbrushes, using the melee. The gun actually, I think, puts a lot of paint on your enemy and makes them take more damage if they're covered in paint, which is a neat idea. And I was just covering your DK in green, and it looked very, very much like what would happen in a Splatoon game. So, yeah, I've enjoyed all the new characters that I've played as so far, and I'm very excited to get all my favorites. I unlocked Lucina recently. I'm just waiting on Cloud. I want Cloud so I can play as Cloud again. And obviously, these DLC characters are going to be so good. I'm so excited for Joker. That seems like a character that could be my main, depending on how he plays. But yeah, it's been good so far. I think that overall, I would say I'm probably disappointed with it as a Smash Brothers game. But also, it's a Smash Brothers game, so you can't really be disappointed with it. It's one of those weird situations. Yeah. So, I don't know.
It's ultimate in some ways, and certainly not in others. And
definitely.
I think there was a hope that it was going to be ultimate in all ways, including single-player modes and trophies, for example. But those are the two areas that are lacking a bit.
If I'm really honest, I would say that I would rather they just ported the Wii U game and added these new characters. If I'm going to be 100%. Brutally honest, I think that would have been a better game than what we got, which is kind of sad, in all honesty. I mean, obviously, I think that World of Light is just way better than any goddamn stupid board game shit they put in the Wii U game. You don't have to do much to be better than that nonsense, because that was just the worst thing they've ever done in a Smash Brothers. But aside from that, the idea that they could just bring over all the trophies from before and add new ones so it would be less work to do so, just be so much better. It would be a much nicer experience. We could do some home run contests. We would be able to maybe do a bit more break the targets if they brought that back. Like event matches. The event matches in Wii U were really good. We had so much fun doing those. I know that Spirits and World of Light is kind of an event match, but ultimately, when you add all those spirits that bypass a lot of stuff, and it does the kind of rock, paper, scissors, like this beats this beats that, it kind of takes away from the challenge of what an event match is, because an event match is a very specific thing. And by tampering with stats and nonsense, it changes what the design of that thing was meant to be. It just feels like an RPG, which is what it is. Like, you have a skill tree in this game. You can level it up with a bunch of bollocks, and it just feels like you're overpowering the enemy as opposed to fighting it strategically and trying to overcome a challenge. So, yeah, it's still a Smash Brothers game, and it's on Switch. And I have to say, in handheld mode, looks fucking clean, really nice, really so good, flows amazingly. Obviously 60 FPS, just Sakurai knows that is the standard he needs to adhere to, and it hits it perfectly, hits the mark. What I am concerned by is I don't know if we're able to do online like some of those other modes. So like Squad Strike, which is a mode I really want to play.
That looks like the best mode because it's
right.
That,
it's basically like Soul Calibur, where you do like random 8, like the 8 characters random all, and you go through each one.
Yeah.
And each stock is a different character. I want to play that, but I don't know if you can do that online. From what we've seen of the online and the way how much of a clusterfuck it is to even get set up, I don't know if it's in there. We'll have to dig a little bit.
We'll have to have a look.
To find out.
So I think by next time we'll have played a lot more multiplayer online. Hopefully,
yes.
We'll know a lot more about all the new characters, and yeah, I'm sure our opinions will grow perhaps. But at the moment, there's a few big flaws, and but I guess that working out how to get the online going in different modes is one of those flaws that we just need to get our head around.
Yeah, and see if there's anything else. I feel like there should be more in this game, and I don't know what everyone's talking about. Where they're like, oh, there's endless infinite content. I'm like, what infinite content? There's a single player and there's classic mode, and then they did like 100-man melee. Where the fuck is everything else? Like, where is my Smash Brothers? So I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, that's going to close us out for this first segment. A lot of Smash Brothers talk, but we'll be back after the break talking about a lot of different games, all the ones that we played this year that didn't come out this year. So you'll want to stick around for that and see where we ranked them. So we'll be back after this.
Colors weave into a spire of flame. Distant sparks call to a past still unnamed. Bear this torch against the cold of the night. Search your soul and reawaken the undying light. On that day when the sky fell away, our world came to an end. In our eyes stood a fading sunrise in the dark, glimmering shadows. Silence grows in the spaces between, stretching out beyond time. Rising up as a chorus of souls finds a voice, flickering through the void. These little sparks cling on to life, everyone caught in the struggle. And then the storms of change, they fan the flames, scattering ashes to the wind. Every soul contains a whisper of light, gleaming faintly as it dwindles from sight. No escape, no greater fate to be made. In the end, the chains of time will not break. Colors weave into a spire of flame. Distant sparks call to a past still unnamed. Bear this torch against the cold of the night. Search your soul and reawaken the undying light.
All right, folks, welcome back, and it is finally time to start in on the Game of the Year chat. It's time to talk about all the video games that didn't come out this year, that we played, that are important to us, that we thought we'd throw onto a list and rank in an order, because that's the only way that lists should work. I do understand people who are like, I don't want to rank my list, I want to do it alphabetically or blah blah blah. That's fine. I'm always in favour of a ranked list, just because arbitrary rankings are something that I enjoy a lot and I think is fun to figure out, and it gives you a challenge, right? Because it's not easy to come to a conclusion about whether some first-person shooter is better than some obscure puzzle game.
And then in a few years, MBZ, I can say, hey, but you thought this game was better than that game. Why are you arguing for it differently on this list?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's weird that like time changes sometimes how you
Definitely.
feel about certain games. And you look back and you're like, why did I put that there? Which is interesting. And I think that's why a lot of people, like with nostalgia and stuff, think back fondly on a lot of games and how they change. But
like how drastically our top 50 games of all time changed from episode 50 to 100. It jumped.
Yeah, exactly. So the layout for this segment is we're going to go through a few emails of some Game of the Years that didn't come out this year that you sent in, and then we're going to do our top 10, myself and Bally, and go back and forth down the list from 10 to 1, and just chat about some video games, some really good games that we played this year. It's been pretty good overall, I think, for older games. For you in particular, Bally, you went ham on some old games.
And there's a few reasons for that I'm sure I'll get into when we get to those lists. But yeah, it's been a good year.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to kick things off with some emails that have been sent in to us from people who have done their list for us, and we've cut down a few of them, and we only have a few here, so we just want to run through and see some of the flavour of what everyone has been playing. So the first one's from Acerbis, who says, congratulations on another fine year of podcasting, and in particular reaching that 5-year milestone. Thank you, Acerbis. Here are my games of the year that I played for the first time this year that didn't come out this year. Before I get to the list, I need to give a quick honourable mention to Lisa, which is a game I'm still in the middle of and would have probably made the list if I had beaten it. It's a side-scrolling gritty RPG similar to Earthbound in how it does its world building through encouraging you to interact with everything to see what humorous quip was written. It seems really good. Always like a good Earthbound style game, so that sounds very, very cool. Now on to the proper list. Number 5, Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. The way intelligent systems manage to create a world so different from anything the Mario cast has ever interacted with, and yet not feel at all out of place, is really something to behold. Number 4, Yakuza Kiwami. This game continues to deliver on the series' main strength, the juxtaposition between 3 elements. 1, the very serious main story. 2, the bonkers side stories. And 3, the dopiness of our boy, Kazuma Kiryu. Add in the sheer amount of things to do around Kamurocho and an obnoxious amount of Goro Majima, and you've got yourself another great Yakuza game. Yakuza is one of those series that I just need to play a bit more, because I watched Giant Bomb play through Yakuza Kiwami, and I was very, very into it.
When did that one come out?
That came out last year,
Right.
and that is a... No, actually, sorry, they didn't play through Kiwami, they played through Yakuza 0. Yakuza Kiwami is a remake of Yakuza 1, and Yakuza 0 is like a prequel, basically. But yeah, I need to get around to those, because I really enjoyed watching them play through Yakuza 0. Number 3, Opus Magnum. How Opus Magnum manages to capture the satisfaction attained from problem-solving better than any other game is impressive. Creating, programming, and optimizing your mechanical alchemy contraptions is addicting, but not as addicting as watching your creations churn out the required molecules with increasing speed and incredibly satisfying sound design. Games like Opus Magnum are ones that I hear about all the time, that, like, I think Zachtronics is the studio that does it, and I look at them and I'm like, these are basically games just about programming, and I'm not good at that at all, and I have no aptitude for it, so I always find it interesting.
It's like it's just like a more complicated Mario Maker, you know?
Well, yeah, to some degree, I guess, but it's actually, you actually have to know something about how, systems work and stuff like that, which... Right. I may try at some point, because I have an interest in maybe learning some programming, but then I think about it, I'm like, God, am I ever going to be able to do that? It seems very intimidating. Number 2 is the Sexy Brutale, which is a game I've heard a lot about. He says, it is expertly crafted. The music and visual design blend together coherently, resulting in a unique Roaring Twenties aesthetic. The time-bending mechanic mixes puzzle-solving and exploration in innovative and ingenious ways. The story sticks the landing on an ending in a way most games would fail. And his number 1 is Darkest Dungeon, which appears at face value to be a simple yet brutal turn-based dungeon crawler with a jaw-dropping Lovecraftian horror art style. Yet it hides an addicting and rewarding gameplay loop that asks how far you are willing to push your heroes and your luck. I played over 100 hours of Darkest Dungeon this year and will definitely be embarking upon multiple new campaigns in the years to come. Thanks for reading my list. I look forward to hearing what everyone else has been sinking their teeth into this year. Hopefully be back in 2 weeks with my GOTYs proper. Your stalwart listener, Acerbis. Thank you, Acerbis, for that list. Very interesting one. I think Paper Mario Thousand Year Door is one of those games that gets talked about so much by people as a classic RPG that should get around to at some point. We need to get on those Paper Marios, Bally.
Yeah, sure. We really do. There's always a chance of it in a backlog club. It's an option. It's an option.
Absolutely.
Our next list is from Simon S., who's from the Netherlands. He says, "Dear guys at This Nintendo Life, here are my top 5s for 2018. Top 5 games I played this year that didn't actually come out this year. Number 5, Devil's Third on the Wii U." Well, we'll have
That's
a chat
choice.
about this in a second.
That's a choice.
No, number 4, Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest on the Super Nintendo. Number 3, Castlevania.
It's actually Diddy's Conquest, just as a slight correction there.
What did I say? Diddy's
it's
Kong...
not Diddy. He's written it as Diddy Kong's Quest. The game is actually called Diddy's Conquest, I think.
That's clever. That's very clever. Only Rare would ever come up with something.
Yeah.
Number 3, Castlevania Mirror of Fate on the 3DS. Number 2, Fire Emblem Fates Conquest on 3DS.
Yes.
Number 1, Yoshi's New Island on 3DS.
Well, it's definitely... Every year Simon sends us a list, and I'm like, I don't know if he's trolling us or if this is actually...
Or just personal taste,
Personal taste, that he loves Devil's Third and Yoshi's New Island, but But yeah, a great list that always surprises me, and it is great. So
I need to get around to that second Donkey Kong Country game because everyone who has played all three of them says it's the best. So yeah,
right. I know Danielle Riendo on Waypoint says that she can't decide between Tropical Freeze and Donkey Kong Country 2 for her favorite in the series.
That says a lot, right? You need to get on that.
And do you want to take this last one then from Sean Bally?
Sure. Sean, Timeless Gaming UK says, I just wanted to share my top games that I played this year that didn't come out this year. Xenoblade Chronicles 3D on 3DS. Quite simply, the best RPG I've ever played. The stellar voice acting and epic story elevates the decent gameplay into an amazing package. Golf Story on Switch. I loved the humor in this quirky golfing RPG and the solid gameplay never stopped being fun. I think I prefer Mario Golf on the Game Boy Color overall, but Golf Story is a fantastic spiritual successor that had me grinning throughout. Fire Emblem Awakening on 3DS. My second ever Fire Emblem game, the first being Fate's Conquest. I found that game far too hard and frustrating and ended up having to play on casual mode in order to finish it. Awakening was far less daunting and I had a much better time because of it. I also found the story and characters to be much more likable, and the option of Japanese voice actors was a godsend after having to endure the hammy American dub in Conquest. I'm 100% with Bally when it comes to American accents and fantasy settings. I just wanted to finish off by saying thanks for putting out so many fantastic podcasts. I actually found you from your Xenoblade Chronicles retrospective episode, which I listened to after finishing the game earlier this year. Since then, I've caught up on a huge amount of your other episodes, and it's kept me thoroughly entertained at work. Your ranking episodes are a particular highlight, so I'm really glad to be able to contribute to this one. I'm hoping you'll do another Backlog Club soon, as I love hearing you talk about older games, and I'd love to join in with one too. Anyway, keep up the great work, Sean.
Well, thank you very much, Sean. And I think that having episodes where we look back on games is quite good to find people who have just finished those games. I'm like, yeah, I want to listen to, because that's what I do when I finish a game. It's like, is there a spoiler cast out there about this thing? That I
agree.
Listen to,
and just the fact that we talk about games that we played this year that didn't come out this year, when many regular gaming podcasts, they're always talking about the newest, latest, best, and it has to be what's just come out, what's coming out, and we try to obviously cover that as well, but there's always times in the year where we're playing backlogs and older games, and it's important that they get recognition, because ultimately
and I think most people who play games play that way, honestly. Like that, a lot of people, there are people who follow the industry closely and always are on the newest next thing, but most people are just like, yeah, I'm still playing this game from a couple of years ago, catching up on it, because got to save some money, can't get everything day one.
It's easy to think that everyone plays like video game journalists, when that's how video game journalists discuss the way that they play games, whether they're on to the next, and you're like, well, not everyone's playing the hottest thing at the moment, but
great. All right, well, thanks everyone for sending those lists in. We'll do a bit more of lists next time, so if you didn't manage to get yours in for this time, send it in, and we may be able to cover yours on the next show before the year ends. So, fantastic. Okay, well, let's kick things off then with our top 10 games that we played this year that didn't actually come out this year. And Bally, how did you feel overall about this year in terms of your old games?
So, this year, old games coming to Switch was a big deal. There's a lot of games on this list, and many games that didn't make my list, that are old games that came to Switch new this year. So it was my first chance to play them. And lots of games that you've been recommending for years in some cases that I should try out, MBZ. And then I was like, right, well, they're on to Switch now. Perfect opportunity. I'll pay my premium price to buy these games and play them handheld. And in almost all circumstances, it was definitely worth it. So that's, for me, why my list is so strong in many ways, combined with the fact that I did pick up a PlayStation 4 this year. And I actually played more new PlayStation 4 games rather than old PlayStation 4 games this year. Just kind of with the way that all the other Switch games I was playing, and certainly in 2019 I'd hope to play maybe a few more older PlayStation 4 games, knowing that there's not quite the density of lineup coming out next year on PlayStation 4 that I'm keen to pick up. So that's kind of how my list has been formed. And then there's always the classic stuff. I mean, obviously the Super Nintendo Classic is still in there, and that's kind of how this list has been put together. It's been a really, really, really strong year, and that's partly I guess last year 2017 in terms of Nintendo was unbelievable. Whereas this year, a lot of the newer games, it's been a very PS4 focused year, but still picking up all those classic Nintendo games that have come to Switch has been amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, I think for my list, it's been not maybe as strong as it could have been overall. But I think there are games on here that I adore, and I think are going to be ones that I will cherish for a very long time. So I think it's every year I find a game that I could say is probably gonna like in the running for my top 10 of all time. You know,
absolutely, I'm the
and
same. Yeah.
That's awesome when that happens. So yeah, should we start things off then, Bally, with your number 10?
Sure. Well, my number 10 is a new game to Switch, but it's an older game, and that's Axiom Verge.
Nice.
This was one of the games that you'd been keen that I try out, and I think that this game is the closest feeling game to Super Metroid I've ever played. It's not scared to throw really tough bosses at you, and it's not very handholdy when it comes to exploration and things. It's not as brutal as Super Metroid, I'd argue, but I had such a great time with this game. I'm not a huge fan of the kind of sci-fi kind of aspect, and the art style I do like, although there are other art styles in this genre that I definitely prefer. But
yeah,
that's
it's very voxely and pixely, and
and like the color palette.
When you destroy
very...
bosses and they just explode in the craziness.
Yeah,
that
that stuff
is
looks
awesome.
really cool. Yeah. So that kind of emphasis on pixel art and the way that pixels kind of interact with the way that you play with certain beams that you're firing at different walls and enemies, and you can get enemies to kind of essentially, they look like they're just glitching out and stuff like really cool, innovative stuff that is thrown in there.
I think, like, similar to Super Metroid, it's also a game laden with secrets and things to find and just hidden weird areas. Like, I remember when I played it, I came across this one place that I just went through a wall and ended up in some, like, glitch zone. And at the end of that zone was, like, a special gun that I was able to get. And, like, a lot of the items you collect in this game are different types of weapons that aren't required to finish the game, but are good rewards for exploration as you go through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hard not to just fall back into your favorite gun and always use that.
Yeah, I tended to do that quite a bit.
And I did as well, but there were always certain bosses, certain enemies where it was like, hey, actually, I could really struggle with my normal vanilla weapon that I enjoy using on the game generally, or I could just try using this one and actually finding out, hey, it actually is really easy to defeat this boss or this enemy using this quirky weapon I've not really used throughout the game. So there was some cool stuff in there, and I like how a lot of those weapons are very optional, so you pick up some, you miss some, and everyone's experience with this game can be very different as a result of that. One of the hardest final bosses I've ever faced, I think.
It's pretty brutal.
I found it really hard. And yeah, overall, a really, really solid Metroidvania that I played near the start of the year. It's fantastic on Switch. I would highly recommend if you're into the genre. That's my number 10, Axiom Verge.
Great. Axiom Verge is an awesome game. Glad to see it represented. My number 10 is a game that I played at the very start of the year, and I literally played it in one day. It is the original Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior 1 on Game Boy, which I played through emulation. But
this is retro as hell.
The retro as hell. But this is a game that, I have a mission in life, Bally, to finish every Final Fantasy and every Dragon Quest, which I know is like a fool's errand.
I swear there was some other RPG game series in there as well. Was it?
No, it's just Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy for the moment. If I decide that I've finished with those and I want to do something else, then maybe. But in my quest to do so, I was like, okay, I'm gonna start from the beginning. Let's go to the first game. And the first game on the NES is actually pretty archaic and not really a fun experience, especially for someone who, for me personally, I find it so much easier to go back and play old Game Boy games than old NES games because I grew up on Game Boy games. Like things like Pokemon and things that I played, like there's this game based on Quest for Camelot, which was a movie that had come out in the late 90s, and it was like a Zelda-style top-down game that my sister had gotten for her Game Boy when we first got the Game Boy. And so those style of Game Boy graphics and everything, and the sound chip and the way that the music works and everything, I'm just more amenable to that style. So I thought, if I'm going to play the first game, I'm going to play it in the version that appeals most to me, which is that Game Boy version. And having played it, I was just so impressed by how large and expansive and ambitious that game is to be, an old NES RPG that set the standard for RPGs going forward. The world is crazy filled with so many different things, and it's very obscure. There's a lot of annoyances, like you have to like if you run out of keys, you don't have enough keys, you have to go back to this one place in the world that sells keys, and you have to have enough on you, but your inventory is limited, so you can only have so many. I think that I enjoyed it more because I was able to fast forward through a lot of the grinding, and 90% of that game is grinding. It's just like fighting random enemies in the overworld in order to beat them and level up and then be able to buy some good gear. But it's fun delving into the dungeons. It's fun going over the overworld, and there's so many like weird random puzzles that are so obscure and things that I usually hate. But just going through it with a guide to help me, and enjoying the grind and being able to level myself up fast, and just I wanted to experience the game, and I think the way I experienced it was the best way to do so with the modern conveniences of having the speed up button
Would
on
it
an
have been
emulator.
doable without modern conveniences?
Yeah,
or would
well,
you have
actually,
gone a bit mad?
the funny thing about it is that back in the day on my Ace card on my DS, I had basically put a Game Boy emulator onto that so I could play it on my DS.
Right.
And Original Dragon Warrior was one of the games I'd put on there just to test out. And I had played it for like a good hour or two, just running around, grinding on enemies and leveling up. And so it is definitely possible and feasible to do it that way. It just take a long time, and I just didn't want to spend the time doing it, so I'd rather just kind of breeze through. And it was a really enjoyable experience, and it was very satisfying to finish the entirety of the first Dragon Warrior in one day. And there's something unique about it as well, because you start that game at a castle, and then literally you can see down below the final boss area, the final castle, and it's separated from you by a lake or a river, I should say, going through. And the entire adventure is about going the long way round, basically going around the entire island till you eventually get your way to that final place. And it's far more complicated than I originally thought it would be. Like, you have to get a bunch of items to unlock areas. There's this really hard to find item that's hidden on this very one specific panel in the overworld that to get there is a nightmare, and how people figured it out in 1980 whatever, I don't know. I imagine guides would have been very helpful, because I think the original Dragon Warrior came with Nintendo Power back in the day. If you like subscribed to Nintendo Power, I think you got it, and then they had a guide with it as well.
How did people without Nintendo Power back then do anything? Like,
they didn't. I mean, that was the thing. Like, and I know a lot of us talk about how did anyone figure out anything back in the day, but back then, Nintendo Power and other magazines and strategy guides existed everywhere, and people would share information about them. And so, yes, it was obscure, but there were means to find out what you needed to do. So it was all available. But yeah, I just thought it was a great game to go back to. And it doesn't necessarily hold up, but I really enjoyed playing through it. So that's why I put it at number 10 on my list.
Well, my number 9. And this kind of, I guess, speaks to how strong this list is. My number 9 is Super Meat Boy.
What the fuck, man?
Right.
That's some bullshit.
Yeah, this game, again, came out on Switch near the start of the year. I still can't get my head around the theming of this game. I just don't like
you when you told me, like, I don't like the meat and the blood, I was like, okay, sure, fine. Like, that literally has never crossed my mind when it comes to Meat Boy. I actually really like the sound of the slapping against the wall, and like
right.
the fact that it leaves a trail, because it, like, you can see where you've been, and like you slowly make the entire level red because of you sliding all around it. And there's something about it that I find satisfaction in. I don't know what that says about me versus you.
The idea it becomes more red is fine. It's the fact that you're a slab of meat and that is blood that I'm less okay with. But anyway,
I don't know. It's the cartoonish nature of it that gives
cartoony.
me enough remove from it that I don't really think about it in that way. If it was a realistic Meat Boy, can you imagine fucking realistic Meat Boy? That would be the most horrifying thing.
It kind of would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, the controls I thought were incredibly silky smooth, and there's this just crazily addictive level design. It was the first kind of instant respawn platformer that I'd played, and I absolutely loved it just for that. It was so fast paced. Just pick up, play like half an hour on Switch so easily out of sleep mode, and it was incredibly satisfying. Some of the levels near the end were unbelievably difficult. I must admit, on the final level, like the final boss, I really struggled, and I must admit that maybe for about a portion of that I wasn't having a ton of fun, but eventually I beat it, and that was one of my greatest gaming achievements, actually, was beating Super Meat Boy. But yeah, I think Meat Boy Forever, is it called, is coming.
Yes,
that's kind of meant to be this year. Now it's next year.
So during the Kind of Funny Game showcase, they actually had a trailer for it with a release date, and it's not an actual release date, but it's coming in April of next year now.
Cross-platform, including Switch.
Yes,
all right,
it is.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be interested in that. I mean, 2019 isn't looking. There's not a ton of games that I'm definitely day one on. So maybe that could be a game that I'd pick up around April time. But we'll see. So yeah, Super Meat Boy. What a game! That's my number 9.
It's one of the best platformers of all time. You put it at number 9, Bally. What's wrong?
I hear you.
Yeah. I know that you definitely had issues. Like, we talked about that specific enemy that you're really fucking annoyed by that kept killing you and stuff like that.
Yeah. And there are platformers that I'm sure we'll talk about in future shows, maybe next time show, that have just taken aspects of Meat Boy and gone to the next level. So yeah, there's a lot, but this was, I guess, the first of that ilk.
Yeah, absolutely. It created basically my favorite platforming genre. So there you go. My number 9 it's not a game I really expected to put on here, but the more I thought about it, I was like, actually, I had a really good time with this. And it's Shantae Half Genie Hero, which I played on Switch earlier this year. And if you'll remember from maybe a couple of years back when we played Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, I wasn't a huge fan of that game. I didn't like
that game.
Yeah, it's good and it's fun, but I think that some of the elements about it were really frustrating to me, like the fact that you had to go through these really long stretches with enemies before you got to the Metroidvania style parts, and you had to go around collecting a bunch of random bullshit that was really hard to find and really annoying, and it didn't give you a lot of direction. Stuff, whereas Half Genie Hero really streamlines so much of that process. I'd say it's overall a much easier game, and you do go back to areas, so it is about retraversal, but the thing that makes it better is it gives you direction. It will indicate to you where you need to go and what specifically you need to get. It looks really nice. It's this mixture of HD art with some 3D elements to it, and I think it just looks amazing on Switch. There's a great variety to the different areas you go to, and the crux of it is that Shantae can transform into different animals, and so a lot of it is getting different animal forms, going back to areas you've previously been to, and just collecting a bunch of stuff that you need to get in order to finish the game. And I actually ended up 100%ing it, not because I don't know, it was one of those things that I was enjoying myself so much playing through it that I was like close enough to 100%, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go through. I'll just find everything that I want to in this game. And there are some really unique transformations that really change the level design and make you think about it in new ways. So when you first go through one of these areas, it's like this waterfall level where there are like platforms and you're going higher and higher, and there's a lot of verticality to it. And you go back there once you get a power up that turns you into a tiny little mouse. And before, you had noticed that these platforms have these little grooves in them that basically join together. And there are, moving platforms that go up and down that will connect to other areas. And as this tiny mouse, you basically retraverse the entire area through these little etchings, and it zooms in really close to them, and you find secret places through that. So the level design has like multi-purpose to it. It's just very smart and really cool. And I found it a lot of fun. It has a great vibe to it. Of course, I think one of the best aspects of Pirate's Curse was the music, and the music here is great as well. It was just a very fluid experience that I thought was great, and I didn't expect to put on this list, but I was looking at the other games, and I'm like, well, I actually had a really good time with this, so I'm going to put it at number 9, and that is that. So I'd check it out. I'd say it is the best Shantae game of the two that I've played, so there you go.
Well, my number 8 is Contra 3, The Alien Wars. So when you came to Brussels earlier in this year, MBZ, I really didn't know what to expect with this game, because you were like, right, Bally, we're playing this, and I kind of felt like it would probably be kind of bad and not much fun. And I was so wrong. It was just such a blast. I maybe we used one or two too many save states near the end of this game.
Nope,
I think
definitely not.
We kind of needed it, but wow, what a fun game that held up so well. I thought there were aspects that were some hot bullshit and that they're hard to defend, but they kind of added to a level of slapstick fun while playing this that was just so much fun, because it was kind of like it didn't really feel like there's no kind of modern games. It's quite a classic genre, the whole kind of side scroller shooter thing, that you don't really get modern games that do that a ton. And I hadn't really played any, I don't think. But working out like, this is how we're going to get this boss, and you need to save this power up for this specific moment, and we'd kind of both work out things gradually and share each other's experiences. And maybe this game is way more fun because we played it in co-op. I'm gonna
100% is
absolutely.
yes.
I think as a single player experience, trying to work out what the hell to do next, and just
trying to survive,
some
honestly. Just trying to
Yeah.
stay alive.
It would have been miserable.
in a single player must be a nightmare. But yeah, playing it with two people, and like you start levels and you have your strategies, and you know like every part of the level. You're like, okay, we do this, then we do this. You need to get this gun so that you can do this with this gun. I'm gonna have that one, and we're gonna like you build out strategies specifically for certain areas, and you know what patterns bosses are gonna do, and then some random element gets thrown in it, and you die like 3 times in a row, and you're like fuck, and you have to start again. But it's so much fun doing that, like remembering that one boss, which is like the top-down one, and it basically like goes round in a circle, and we had to work out how we had to like duck. We had to work out that we had to walk in the opposite direction to stay in this one place so that we could hit the specific weak point, and just going through that experience and finally figuring it out and getting it, when at the start we were like, this is fucking impossible, we're never going to beat this. It's so good because it shows that progression that you go through, and really it's about the persistence and being able to figure out a strategy and execute on it, and also just collaborate, being able to communicate and make sure that we both know what we're doing, and everyone has their goal. It's such a great game. And
just the amount of screaming at the TV with success and failures.
Yes.
And Caroline sitting next to us being like, oh, they're really getting into this. But the energy and like on the button mashing on the Super Nintendo controllers, it felt like a really retro, fun co-op experience. And going in thinking this isn't going to be fun, and coming out away being like, that's maybe the best game we played this weekend, that whole weekend that you came.
Exactly.
It was really just a surprise, and makes its way above games like Super Meat Boy on my list. So I think it did something well. So that's my number 8, Contra 3, the Alien Wars.
Amazing. My number 8 is a game we did this year for our Backlog Club. It is Punch-Out on Wii. And it's a game that I had been wanting to play for a long time. It's a Next Level game, obviously, who've made such classics as the Mario Strikers series and Luigi's Mansion 2, and obviously everyone's favourite Metro Prime Federation Force. And I think they'll probably be working on Luigi's Mansion 3. I imagine so, right?
Yeah,
would you say?
It would make sense. But I don't think it's confirmed yet.
But they're in the business of like reviving Nintendo IP to some degree, like Retro is. These two studios in the West that Nintendo rely on so much are basically there to revive old Nintendo stuff. And I think the job they did with Punch-Out Wii was tremendous. It's such a throwback to the originals, but also adds in so many elements that make it a more playable experience and gives so much character and life to that universe, with an amazing art style that I think just works perfectly for that series. The idea that, figuring out those bosses and being able to use the sound cues and the visual cues together, it's one of those games that you could actually just have headphones on and play blind. I imagine that's probably been done at like an AGDQ or something, where someone has just blindly played through a Punch-Out game, because it is so much about listening for what they say. Like they'll all have different phrases that they say before they do a move, and if you know those, then you can instinctively move out of the way in the right direction. But it's such a simple idea, and it's just executed so well.
I think it was on because on Radio Free Nintendo they just did sort of the Punch Out series in their
Yes.
what do they call them,
Retroactives.
And I think they said on the Super Nintendo version sometimes they do fake audio cues to like mess you up or something, and they said that it was just really lame that they did that, and to have the Wii version irons out all those kinks, and like it's the best of the Punch Out series. And I mean it's the only one that I've played, and I really enjoyed this game as well. It was just it's essentially like a puzzle fighting game, and I don't think I've ever played any other puzzle fighting game. Like it's not really something you think about, and obviously only being boss driven is another selling point that I think is pretty cool. When you get there's a few games out there that are only bosses, and this is one of them, and it works really well for that idea.
Yeah, it's just such a great aesthetic to it. It has a really cool vibe, and I like the way that it builds on itself, and you have a lot of extra stuff you can do. We didn't end up doing it, but you can do the title defense, and then you can eventually fight goddamn Donkey Kong in the game. There's a lot of fun references and elements in there. I would say that they were talking about this on the retroactive as well, but for the future I would like to see them do some new stuff with some different characters, because a lot of these characters are just put back from previous games, and Punch Out Wii does feel like a remake in some senses of the original Punch Out, just like in HD. I don't know what you do to evolve the series, because it is still built on that core foundational element of puzzle solving with like moves and learning patterns, and that's why it's so good. So trying to think of like where's the next step for it is a bit tricky maybe, but I would say that it is a series I would love to see come back again, and it would be perfect on Switch. I think it'd just be an amazing game for the system. So yeah, I think that is another one of those classic Nintendo franchises that we've now covered to some degree, and I really enjoyed it. Thought it was brilliant.
My number 7 is our other backlog club, and that's Final Fantasy VI.
Yes.
Which I keep calling Final Fantasy 7, so it being in 7th place isn't helping with that problem.
No.
So yeah, this was my first Final Fantasy. I thought the story and characters in this game was just like the best part of the game by a mile. I think the idea that the story is essentially in two very different acts that are so different from each other, the two separate acts, where the first act feels quite traditional, quite building up to face the big bad, and then the second act
quite
is
linear as well.
Right,
and you know where you're going, and you have direction.
It's that very much Star Wars idea of the Empire being, the Empire forming, and then the Empire eventually being defeated, kind of in two acts, prequel and original trilogy. I guess you can compare it to in some ways,
right?
And
with the kind of like middle portion of it being the downfall, and then heroes having to rise back up,
right? And that cast of characters that takes you through that incredibly immersive, interesting story, I just really enjoyed. I think playing a game like Octopath Traveler this year, it made me realize, battle systems have changed a lot, and the battle system, I guess, in Final Fantasy VI is very traditional to its core, I guess. And maybe I'm already kind of wanting in my JRPG something that does something a bit different with battle systems, but that's just a personal preference. And certainly the battle system grew on me as you kind of learn how to use the espers and all that kind of thing, which was kind of cool, where you essentially can teach anyone anything,
if you put the time in, you can have everyone have every spell in the game,
right?
Which can help for the final boss if you have like Meteor or whatever that you can just smash down constantly,
right.
Which I did for a couple of characters, but yeah, it's pretty cool. It allows that flexibility.
I really want to try more in the Final Fantasy series, and it's great that they're all now coming to Switch in 2019.
Exactly, we've got goddamn 7 and 9 and 12 and
so I think I will try 7 next. I don't know, but
you should.
Probably
7's a good
in
game.
2019. That would be a good next step. But yeah, I had a blast with this game, and in a very tough year of amazing games, it has gotten to number 7. So yeah, that's Final Fantasy VI. My number 7.
Wow, there must be a lot of games above that which are cream of the crop. My number 7 is a game that most people would put at number one for all time and ever. It is Super Mario World, a game that Bally shits on constantly. You can't hear the end.
This is very high on your list, I might say.
I really enjoyed Super Mario World, and I was surprised how much I liked it. Having come off Mario 3 being bitter as all hell and not having enjoyed that experience and thinking that the end is bullshit and it's
a real step
annoying
up.
and frustrating. I think Mario World does this amazing thing of having such a vibrant look to it, having an overworld that feels so cozy, having levels that are actually compact and don't overstay their welcome, and yet have little secret elements to them that are fun to find and that will surprise you and take you to places that you don't think you're going to go. There is a real joy of discovery in that game that I didn't think I would enjoy, but ended up thinking was a great aspect of it. Their platforming elements and the cohesiveness of it is far better overall than I think a lot of its previous iterations. And I just like the variety. I think it does a lot of different things, like using the cape in different levels and being able to have, crazy contraptions that are more unique. There are a lot of elements in Super Mario World that didn't show up in Mario Maker that surprised me.
And you played Mario Maker before World, whereas I played them the other way around, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And so there are a lot of things that you can't really do in Mario Maker that show up in Super Mario World, which I hope for the next Mario Maker they'll add in a bit more of that stuff. But I just like the mechanics of this game because you're able to hold items like P-switches and like throw them up and catch them, and you do the spin jump. There's a real fluidity to the movement, and that's why I think when I play Mario Maker I tend to gravitate towards Super Mario World levels, because I like the core design set that game goes with. It feels like there's a lot of flexibility and creativity with it, just owing to the fact that you can throw things about and catch things and interact more with the enemies. That level of just changing aspects of the world and being able to just interact with it a bit more, I found super satisfying. And I think that even its hardest levels at the end, I enjoyed going through, despite the fact that, there may be as bullshit as some of the hardest stuff in Mario 3, but there are bullshit that I respected more. I think that the level design was stronger. I think that, obviously, it's just nicer to be in that world and just exist in some of the environments that they create. Doing Star Road is a lot of fun, despite the fact that, some of those levels, like when you become Big Fat Balloon Mario and you have to float through all these areas and have to dodge stuff, and it's really hard, but it reminded me of games like Super Meat Boy, and I turned it into a Super Meat Boy with the save state element. So being able to do that and reset and just play those Star World levels as if they were, a level from Celeste or from
Imagine
Super
those
Meat Boy.
people playing them without those save states.
No, I know.
Though.
That's
blows
where
my mind.
I know, and I think that's the point where I'm like, yes, I'm glad I'm playing this in 2018 and not in 1994 or whenever it came out. It would have been great because you would have got a lot of longevity out of that game back then, but I think doing it now definitely served me better and allowed me to enjoy those levels on, in a different way, and appreciate the level design for what it is and not be frustrated when I die, because I can just reset, and go back and do it again.
Yeah. And it's a pretty quick reset on the Super Nintendo Classic, assuming you have the box fairly near you, as annoying as it is to have to do that.
Yes, or if you're a smart person and go and hack your Super Nintendo Classic, then you can like button map it so you can bring up that menu by just using the controller, which I will do eventually. But yeah. Super Mario World, it's really good. It's really good.
You think it's really good? I think it's good. And we'll leave it at that.
There we go.
My number 6 is Overcooked Special Edition. So this was another game. It came out in 2017, I want to say, actually, on Switch. I think it was at the end of that year. This was something I'd been meaning to play for a while. I'd always wanted to try it, and I managed to persuade Caroline to be like, hey, let's play a co-op game together. And then she just absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved it.
I think she likes it more than you do.
I think she does like it more than me, and we were so keen. Like Caroline's game of E3 2018 was Overcooked 2. Like that was her absolute. This is the hottest game coming out the rest of this year that I want to buy and play. And we did that, and we'll talk about that next episode. But the original Overcooked, well, it's not the original. It's a special edition of the original. Just working out strategies and getting really slick, becoming really strict on how you play this game, and especially in 2-player, because I think in maybe 3 or 4-player, trying to discuss strategies and that sort of thing can maybe get a bit too complicated because there's more moving parts. But in a 2-player scenario, you can really kind of nail what you're trying to achieve. And I just think the satisfaction of we never moved on before getting 3 stars, or I think we went back and got through. Well, essentially, we got 3 stars and everything, but there were some levels, especially in this first game, that were incredibly difficult to get 3 stars in, and it was just constantly going back, saying, "Right, we missed out on 3 stars by 10 points. How are we going to play this level again and get it absolutely right? What are we going to change?" And then trying out different tactics and strategies, and it was just incredibly satisfying to see those come together. And yeah, we went on and played all the extra levels in the special edition. Getting 3 stars in the lot, and then day one we picked up Overcooked 2, and we had a blast with that as well. But Overcooked is
similar to Contra
awesome.
3. It is all about communication and making sure that you know what you're supposed to do and executing on it. And I will say that when I stepped into the kitchen, metaphorically, with both of you playing, I felt very out of my depth in terms of, like, you were just master chefs, like Gordon Ramsay, and I was like one of those poor fucking sods on his show who's like, I don't know what to do.
And he said, you can wash the dishes, just keep washing. That's your job. We'll do the rest. And you're like, right, okay, I'm washing dishes. Yeah.
I'm just like, I'll be in the corner. Just leave me alone, please. Oh boy.
Yeah, that was hilarious. And yeah, I feel like at some point we should maybe try that campaign together, MBZ or.
I mean, doesn't Overcooked 2 allow you to do that online?
Yeah, it does have online. So maybe see if that's on sale at some point, and we could.
It'd be really nice if I had crossplay, because I think I just got it for free on Humble Bundle or something, or not Humble Bundle, Twitch Prime. I think I got I think I got the original Overcooked for free through Twitch Prime or something like that. It's somewhere. The thing with PC is you just own everything.
Free game.
You don't know.
Have it.
Yeah,
it's a game on Switch. Charge an extra £5.
Pretty much, yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Is that your done?
Yeah, that was my number 6, Overcooked.
Fantastic. Number 6. My number 6 is Castlevania Portrait of Ruin. So this is the second DS game.
I am so lost with these names, it's ridiculous. I
know.
I could not name you a single console that any of these games are on.
I don't expect you to. This is the second DS game, and after this year, I've now finished all the Igavania style Castlevania games. So that's Symphony of the Night, the 3 GBA games, and the 3DS games. So
there's 7 total, right?
7 of those, which I have finished, and this is the penultimate one. So it's the second DS game, and I think that this is my favourite in the series outside of Symphony of the Night. Nothing can touch Symphony of the Night. I think that game is the best one, and it's not going to be topped. It's just so great. But Portrait of Ruin, I would say, is my number 2 in terms of all these games. And I think the reason why is because it has a lot of unique elements to it, has a great difficulty curve, and is just really varied in a lot of its locations. So instead of having one super large castle, which it kind of does, it has a relatively large castle, but what happens is you find these portraits which you jump into. So it's basically the Mario 64 of Castlevania games, and every time you jump into a portrait, it has a new Metroid level to it. So it's like a smaller, more compact, like mini different areas that you go to, and it allows a lot of variety. So there's a desert level, there's a like carnival level with clowns and stuff, and it goes in like the circle, and things are on the ceiling and everything. So it's able to get away from a lot of the traditional areas that you kind of get bored of in Castlevania games. Like it was unique the first time I went to the library in Symphony of the Night, and it was unique the first time I went to the clock tower in Symphony of the Night, but they kept repeating those elements throughout a lot of these other games, and after a time it just became like, oh yeah, I'm going to this place, this is where the Medusa heads are, I know what's going to happen here. It kind of broke the monotony by implementing this portrait system where you go to different places and makes it so it's a bit more unique and has a bit more flavor to it. And I think the system of having the two characters that you switch between was really neat. One of them who's more focused on magic, the other one who's more focused on melee. And there are quite a few different puzzles that you do where you have to switch between them. There's one where you are riding on this, I guess, I can't remember what it is exactly, but it's like this conveyor belt style thing, and you keep having to like duck and dodge and switch between the two characters in order to get through it. So it has some puzzle solving elements. Obviously you have the upgrades that you get along the way. It has that classic Castlevania formula of leveling up, getting new gear, traversing the environment. It's just a really solid, well made, great looking Castlevania that has enough unique elements that make it stand out from the rest of them. And just it adds a bit of a twist to the series, which I thought was a lot of fun. And the actual true ending is one that I did get, because a lot of these Castlevania games I would go through just do it first time and get the quote unquote bad ending, which is you don't really fight the real super final Dracula boss, you fight something else, and you have to kind of go back and get a bunch of extra stuff in order to do it. But this game, I enjoyed it so much, and there was actually quite a bit more to do after the false ending, with like 4 more portraits basically. So there were a lot of different areas to go through that I went and I got the actual ending and then fought the final boss, and it was a good challenge as well, but it wasn't overwhelming, and it was one that I could overcome, and thought it was great. I really have good things to say about it, and I would say that I'd recommend this over a lot of the other ones, despite the fact that a lot of people say Aria of Sorrow is the best one. I'd probably put Aria of Sorrow third on my list, but this is right up there. It's a really great Castlevania experience. So I
should really get to one of these in 2019. I keep saying I will, and it's just not happened yet. But
I still say that. Man, I wish that the PlayStation Classic was better and you could get one of those and like play Symphony of the Night on that. But
the fact that I can't play Symphony of the Night on my PS4 is weird.
You can now actually, because they just released the Castlevania collection thing, which has its what's the one that Richter's in? My name is blanking on me now, but it's that one and Symphony of the Night together. Rondo of Blood.
I was just going to make up some sort of dark veil of sorrow.
It's usually musical term plus sad thing, like Harmony of Despair. Like there you go. That's a Castlevania name.
Did it?
That's an actual game.
Oh right.
But yes, Rondo of Blood is another really good game. That's the game that Richter appears in. Richter obviously now in Smash Brothers, but you can buy the collection on PS4, which has those 2 games in it, which I would say that's probably the best way for you to play Symphony of the Night, and I would recommend doing that.
That's a good idea.
Yes, you should do that next year. That'll be a good one. Sweet, so that's my number 6, Castlevania Portrait of Ruin. What's your number 5, Bally?
Yes, the top 5. So my number 5 is Owlboy. So Owlboy feels like Zelda cross Metroidvania. It's sort of this, I guess, the structure of a Metroidvania is in, it's side on, that kind of thing. But then the pacing and the emphasis on story and the setting feels like Zelda. It really feels like Wind Waker, actually. This feels so much like a 2D Wind Waker. I think it's a big reason I actually love this game. And the emphasis on the main character and the story and the character development and where this game goes, I thought was so impressive. And
that's interesting, because I haven't really heard people talk about the narrative of Owlboy, because that's not something that I expect to be quite high up.
So the presentation is better than the narrative, I'll say that. Right. I think the charm of the soundtrack is just ridiculous, like orchestrated and unbelievably, like, you kind of think they've really gone to town with the budget on this soundtrack when this is like a short, 7-8 hour, fairly short experience. You're like, wow, and like this game took an incredibly long time to develop, and it came out ages ago on Steam, and then it took ages to come to consoles. So it kind of had a very staggered release that I think really affected the impact, actually, and the timing with which journalists were talking about this game, because I do think it really is up there, and it seems to have been put to the side a bit by...
Yeah, I think like when it came out, people liked it, but it wasn't necessarily the super indie darling that a lot of those types of games have been thought of.
And since it first came out, there have been indie darlings that have surpassed it massively, even ones that I've played. So it has been forgotten about partially, and that is a shame, but it's just a really strong game. Like the idea that what makes it unique is this flying around ability, where obviously most Metroidvanias you're platforming around, whereas flying around just completely changes.
Kind of breaks it, doesn't it?
It
Like
feels
it makes
strange, because there's the enemies fly around too, and it's more a dual stick shooter where your right stick is controlling the direction with where you're shooting, and you have different guns that you're shooting, and the gun, you don't hold the gun, you hold a character who then shoots a gun, and you've got like, I think one's like a flamethrower, one's a little pellet thing, and one's like a big shotgun kind of thing, and it's really impressive, and that's what makes it so unique. And the animation with which you like might blast through a door or something, like it's all just, the package altogether just feels like, the C word is used way too much, but it just does feel way too charming. Like it's an incredible package, and it is very, very short. It is only about, you could probably blast through it in about 6 hours, but I think it took me about 8 hours because I'm Bally. And
time dilation.
I mean, there are a couple of stealth areas that are not great, but they really don't last long, and otherwise it's just such a solid experience. It's very, very linear, I would say, and that's partly what makes it so quick, is that there's not this extra time you'd spend in something like an Axiom Verge, for example, where you work out where to go next. There's a lot of, this is the path you're meant to go on, go that way. And yeah, but it's Metroidvania combined with like a level of pixel art and Zelda-like production that is pretty rare, and I just thought it was fantastic. And
Great.
Yeah, a game you definitely need to get to, MBZ.
Yeah, no, I do want to play it for sure. I keep trying to be like, I want to figure out this thing where we share accounts, so I'll just play it from your account on my Switch. And I keep being scared about it, about whether we're going to fuck something up doing that, so...
It is a bit scary,
yeah, I have to look up some guide how to do that, but we'll see. Or I'll just buy it on a sale, which I'll probably end up doing. Great, so that's your number 5,
my number 5.
Boy. My number 5 is a game I've never talked about on this podcast, and I haven't even beaten. But I put 50 hours into it. It's Skyrim. It's fucking the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. So I got Skyrim earlier this year in a sale, and I was like, I'm just going to play this and have it as one of those things that I keep going back to, and I don't really intend to finish it necessarily because it's Skyrim and no one finishes Skyrim. And I think one of the reasons why no one finishes Skyrim is because they don't really make it
no one knows
clear
how to finish Skyrim.
What the main quest is. It really flattens the quest experience in the sense that everything is treated equally, right? So you get loads of different quests from so many different people, and it all just goes into this one list, and it doesn't delineate between what is major, what is minor. Like, what is a quest that relates to a guild? What is a quest that is just a random NPC quest? So everything has almost equal stature to some degree, and that makes it so it feels like you're just wandering through this world and going from place to place and just doing things when you want to, and going after things that you are interested in. So I made a character who was a wood elf, who is really good with bow and arrow, because I'd heard that was a good way to go. And then I started again. I was like, oh, actually, I really like magic. So I started using magic a bunch and trying to do that. And the thing with Skyrim is the more you do something, the better you get at it. So the more you kill people with bow and arrow, the higher that skill will go. Your archery skill will go up. And this relates to literally everything. So like crafting materials and cooking and, using your shield, even just like deflecting, even just being hit by enemies because your armor goes up. So just taking hits, just standing there, healing yourself while you take hits is a legitimate way to level up in Skyrim, because literally everything you do is stat-ized, I guess. I don't know. Everything is broken down, and so you're never really feeling like you're wasting time because things are always happening that are being beneficial to you. But I think the thing about Skyrim that strikes me the most is the sense of place and and the wonder of the world. And it's not like Breath of the Wild where, there's a lot of interesting things that you can do like physicsy or mechanically outside in the open world, because it is kind of, just going from place to place. But there is something about the way the music swells and the distance and the fantasy-like element to it, that there were moments where I'm like, I'm just living in Lord of the Rings right now. Like, this is just so well done. And one of my favorite things to do in that game is just to go into a tavern, sit down, find someone who's like playing a song, and just like sit down and listen to them play a song, because there's some really good like classic like D&D style musical instrumentation and bards who go around like singing these songs about tales from things that have happened in the world. It's so dense with lore and information. Like every single goddamn book in that game has like pages. Like you could spend literally 40 hours just reading in Skyrim, because there are hundreds of books, and each of them have maybe, upwards of, there's some with like 20 pages of text, and everything is contextualized within the game. It's not just like, one of the things in The Witcher 3 which meant I didn't read a lot of the stuff in that game was because it was just text on a screen, whereas Skyrim contextualizes it in the game by having a physical book that you look at and you turn the pages and it's written in a script, not a font, so it looks like someone has written the book. So it makes it feel far more like it's a part of the world and makes you want to dig into stuff like that. And honestly, it's very hard to get into, because this is the 5th game in this series. There is so much history to the world, and there's so many things in terms of, the Thieves Guild and, the Dark Brotherhood and all these different factions that have existed for so long, and what the gods and all the different religions. So it's intimidating for sure, but it's one of those rabbit holes that I like going down, and I think that it's been so good as a game that I just go back to and like, I don't know where I am. I don't know. I'm just going to go after this quest and see what happens. And so many weird, interesting things go on. There's some great characters and dialogue and some just towns that are so well crafted. Like the main town of Whiterun that you go to, I know it so well, and it has such a distinct design to it. There's the quest that you go on with the traveling companions, and one of the things this game does really well is it creates situations that feel natural, but that I know are actually scripted. So like when I'm walking towards this town for the first time, this group of traveling companions are fighting off some raiders and they're like dealing with these dudes, and it feels so natural that I just come across them as they're doing this task. But clearly like this is intended for everyone to come across, so that when they're near this town they know that these guys exist within it, and then you can go and talk to them and start their quest line and keep going down it. But it's just so well done because it feels like what would happen in a fantasy world, and there's a naturalness to it which is really, really cool. I'm still really enjoying it. It's one of those games that I heard people describe as an ocean with the depth of a paddling pool, because a lot of the time you're just going into dungeons and fighting things, but it's the stuff around the edges, the music and the world and the lore and the character building that is the strength of these games. Because honestly the combat kind of sucks, and like you're just like mashing buttons to like hit people and using magic, and it can be fun, and using the bow and arrow is definitely a good way to go, but it's about the world, and I think they create a really enticing world that speaks to me personally as someone who loves fantasy and epics in that way. So I'm going to keep playing it. I haven't finished it yet. I played 50 hours.
Caroline is still trucking on. She's 150 hours into this
Yeah, she's
game.
played 100 more hours than me, and still hasn't finished.
I'm like, you going to finish that game anytime soon? She's like, I don't know. And she doesn't really know like where, because like you said, the quests aren't all, they're not separated between.
And I could look it up, obviously.
Sure.
I could go and see, but like, why do that when I've really just enjoyed, just bumming around in Skyrim. It's been
when Caroline's done with it, I will give this game a go, and I need to give it the light of day, because I've just been so busy with other things. But yeah, wow, 150 hours. Can't believe she wants to play Stardew Valley next, and it's like,
oh Jesus,
wow, just so hardcore. Right?
Yeah, crazy.
So that's your number 5.
That's my number 5. So what's your number 4, Bally?
My number 4 is Hollow Knight.
Yes.
So I've played quite a few Metroidvanias now, and there's quite a few on this list. But this might be one of the best, if not the best. It's brutally difficult in parts, and it's brutal in terms of both the boss fights themselves are very brutal, but also the game gives you hardly any hand holding when it comes to finding new areas, and I think that gives it this elevated feeling of freedom and exploration that I think a lot of modern Metroidvanias kind of get away from, like Owlboy, for example. Like it kind of completely ignores the idea of freedom and exploration in favor of, right, this is the narrative we want to set out. And as good as that is, it's not as good as when a game like Hollow Knight goes for the more hands-free approach and gets it right, in my view. And
just lets you go and
other great Metroidvanias like Guacamelee, again, they're fairly linear in part.
Right.
And my personal preference is definitely the more Axiom Verge, Hollow Knight, I guess Super Metroid style that is far less handholdy and more just tougher, because it makes you feel more free, and when you discover something, it's 10 times more satisfying than because some NPC told you need to go to point X marked on your map.
Sure.
And
yeah,
I love that. I think that there are key story moments that are really interesting in the way that you can get to those moments through multiple ways. Like, the world isn't designed in a way where you have to go. You can visit different story moments in the wrong order, essentially, and it's not just set out in stone. I'm not and I know Castlevania does this, and I've, like I said, not played a Castlevania, but I'm not a huge fan of like the multiple endings. You need to fulfill X to get the true ending, and I do prefer games that just say, right, that's the ending, this is how you get there, and that's how we do it. And Hollow Knight definitely feels like it's so open-ended that even at the end of the game, you're like, well, shall I wrap up this game now, or shall I do more and then wrap it up? And I would have liked it to have maybe closed things up slightly neater. But my God, in terms of the presentation and the feeling of like slashing with your nail and the upgrade system.
Yeah, it's just the tiny little elements, little polish elements, like
really good.
Bushes when you're just running through and just like, I'm just going to hit the environment. It's one of those things that I think a lot of video game players do, is when they're going from one place to another, they want to be doing something. They don't just want to be walking. So like, that's why people roll in Ocarina of Time. It's like, I'm going across Hyrule Field, I'm just going to push the analog stick. I want to have something else I can do while I go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to roll. And in Hollow Knight, you're just like, I don't know, I'm going to slash my nails as I go past. And it's so satisfying. The little bushes and leaves will fall, and you'll crack little like stone things along your way. It's that type of touch that elevates it above other games in terms of a polish level.
Yeah, and it feels like a AAA game, but it's not. It's an indie developer, and that's awesome. And that's the direction I feel like a lot of games are going, and that's really, really cool to see, because, you know, AAA developers don't really work too often on Metroidvania-style games. So,
No.
you know, when a really great one like this comes along, it's important that, you know, we appreciate like what this game is doing. And we've just had the Game Awards, and there's, as much as there's been a nice light shown on indie games, there was still an awful lot of AAA behind the back third person games that hog a lot of limelight, and it's those other games that I think that really shine, and when they're done,
and they're
well,
able to take risks and do things like Hollow Knight did. Like it is derivative in a lot of ways, but also it is very bold. Like you don't usually find a game like this that is 30 hours long. Because the pacing is all about usually, you know, speed and being able to speed run. Obviously people speed run this game, but it is a much more contemplative one of those, and I think it really nails that cold darkness, but also is such a good riff on other styles of games as well. So
it's a fantastic game. I'm so glad it came to Switch, and it's still really cheap on Switch. Like, not even on sale. It's like 11 quid. It's crazy. At a time when so many of these games that come to Switch get an extra, $5 tax put on them, it's great to see a game that's as big and great as Hollow Knight come to Switch for such a cheap price. I remember Joseph Anderson, he was talking about, he was obsessed with the value of this game, like the price versus the time that you're putting into it is insane. Similar to levels of like Stardew Valley, which is another cheap game on Switch.
Yeah,
you know, like, both these games just have so much time and they're so cheap. I can't recommend them enough. So yeah, that's my number 4, Hollow Knight.
Great. My number 4 is a game you have already talked about, but one that I thought was just so much fun, and it is Contra 3, which obviously we've talked a little bit about, but I loved playing through that game with you. It was so much fun, and I think it was really cemented in that second level where it's top down, and you have to go to those 5 different points, and that was when we were like, okay, we need to have an order. We need to go this one, then this one, then this one.
There isn't an invisible bit of string between the two of you as well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So you have to really work together. And I liked that it had variety like that in it. So you had the run and gun side scrolling levels, you had the top down ones, you also had like when we were just on a bike in one of those levels and you're like rolling around, and then there's one where you're like climbing up the wall, and there's this really, remember that stupid fucking annoying boss who keeps like pushing itself into the wall as you're trying to climb up, and like bombs are falling, and I remember like having to try to grab one of the spread guns like while the bombs were falling. So many parts of that game are like just burned into my mind because the number of times we had to do them again and again.
The shouting.
But it was so much fun. Like, I just really loved the idea that we started off being like, okay, let's see if we can do this without save states. Let's see if we can just do this from the start. And that meant that we got
decent
really
without save states.
We got to like level 3, I guess it was, and we were like, okay, we can do this. And so that meant we played through those first few levels quite a few times, and so we had to really develop for that second one in particular. And by the end, we were just like breezing through it. We're like, yeah, you do this. I know we're going to get these weapons. This is going to be our strategy. Nail it. Just bomb on through. And then we had like the boss rush at the end where it's like, okay, right, we need to pause here, get the save state. You're going to do this. I want to do that. Let's nail this dude. And it was just tremendous fun. I think that I really want to play another Contra game together. I think it's just such a great experience, and yes, these games are fun to play on their own, but the reason I wanted to do this is because I had watched Vinny and Dan from Giant Bomb play through Contra games together, and it was so much fun just watching those guys come up with their strategies and then try to do it. They were actually going for it way more hardcore, because they wanted to do it without, like, basically doing it without dying, without game overing, in one shot, which I feel like we could eventually do. It would take probably 20 hours, but it would be possible. You just have to get so good at it, and I think, you know, games like that back in the old days were built on that idea. Maybe, yeah. Maybe just choose another Contra game and go for it. But Contra 3, actually, a lot of fun, and I think has great variety to it. Like, comparing it to some of the other ones, it definitely, it's up there for me, and I think that, you know, I want to play some more of it. And they should bring it back. Man, do a new Contra on Switch. How awesome would that be? Give it some online multiplayer. Like, man, I am down for that shit. I want to play some of that. So please, somebody make that game. That'd be nice. That's my number 4, Contra 3. Fucking loved it.
Right, into the top 3 then.
Yes.
My number 3 is Uncharted 2.
Yes.
So I also played the first game. Spoilers, the first game isn't on this list.
No.
And this
first game shouldn't be on a top 10 list, if I'm honest.
No, this game is zombie free, and it also is there's some points in the first game that there's just too many waves that are too difficult, and it's like, come on, I want to progress, and that's what this game improves on so well. Whereas there's less emphasis on the number of waves of enemies and more, I guess they throw a fewer tougher enemies at you, and I kind of prefer that because you kind of strategize around them a bit more, and there's a bit, they kind of hint at a little bit of stealth in this game, even though it's not really, you don't have to stealth
that opening stealth section is not great.
That's the only
they definitely
weak
improve
part
on it as it goes through the series.
That the start, it takes a while before you're getting your guns and you're shooting away at bad guys basically, and the stealthy bit at the start of this game isn't great, but after that, the pacing, the cutscenes, the character development, the story, it's the characters are so strong, and all the balance between running and gunning, puzzles, and cutscenes feels absolutely spot on for like
Yes.
2/3 of this game at least.
It's so
And
perfectly paced.
you're
It's just
constantly-
so well done.
You're in new environments, you're in new moving environments. You know, that train sequence is fantastic. And having played the train sequence near the start of Red Dead Redemption 2, I'm like, this controls like absolute. This is horrible. Like, I can't believe. And like the duck and cover nature of the third person shooting in Uncharted 2 feels so silky smooth. And when you compare it with a game like Red Dead, you just like imagining Red Dead with the silky smooth shooting of a game like Uncharted, and you're into a whole new era of like what open world shooters can be. I think arguably, like I think there's anyway, that's a different conversation. But this game does what it's aiming to do so well. It feels tighter in terms of,
and it's the variety, right, of not just things you're doing, but locales, just going to different places and constantly being surprised by new environments. It feels like a globe-trotting adventure. And that's what stands it apart from the first game for me, because the first game is you're in a jungle. And you're pretty much in a jungle the whole game.
Yeah.
And there's some underground areas and there's some stuff like that, but it is really restricted in terms of its aesthetic, whereas Uncharted 2 just goes for it, and you are just all over the place.
You even get a bit of jungle in this game that almost feels like it's just representing a chunk from the first game, as in like for people who want to
throwback.
Like a throwback just for people who might want to skip the first game, or even for those who have played to be like, oh yeah, this is what Borneo was like with the jungle. Great.
Yeah.
And then it moves on very quickly. And then there's like magical stuff near the end that I won't get into, but it's cool. And it's like, wow.
Hey, guess what? Uncharted always ends with stupid supernatural
magic,
nonsense, just like Indiana Jones.
Right. And that's cool. And I like it. And I still need to play 3. You've lent me 4. I'd love to try Lost Legacy as well, probably. But yeah, just I had absolute blast with this game. It's a really, really strong third-person shooter that I want more of. And you know,
it's a high point in a series that really defined the last generation.
Right.
So
and having only bought a PS4 this year, it was like, I got to play Uncharted. Come on, you can't buy a PS4.
That's
play
top
Uncharted.
of the list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really glad I played it. That's my number 3 is Uncharted 2.
Great. My number 3 is a game that I sat down and played in 2 hours and was blown the fuck away by, and it is Super Hot, which I know you've bought the VR version for, which is a completely different game. Actually, it's not the same game. It's just a different thing, but in VR.
I'm going to try that start next year.
But Super Hot is such a tremendous and fun game. It obviously is all about the idea that when you move, time moves. And so it's a first-person shooter where you are in this very white aesthetic, and enemies are represented by like this. They're basically like, you know, the wireframe guys from Smash Brothers, but they're just like red kind of shard guys, and when you shoot them they like smash like glass, and every level is a puzzle. It's kind of like Punch-Out in that way, where each level is obviously determined by how good you are and how dexterous at dodging and moving, but it's all about thinking what the strategy will be, who you're going to take down first, and giving you that time to think, because time only moves when you move. So you can be standing still, making your strategy, and then afterwards, after you've finished the level, it does like a full sped up version of everything you did, and it does kind of look awkward, because there are some moments where it's like, that's not how fluidly it would flow, but it is really cool to see everything working together. And I think it's just the interplay of systems where you can shoot a gun at someone, throw that gun at another person, grab their weapon out of midair, use it to slice down another guy, then like throw it across the room to a different dude, pick up another like machine gun which has bullets that will go at a different rate, dodge out the way of something else and throw that to someone else. There were moments where I was grabbing a gun, throwing it at the dude, grabbing the next one, throwing it at the dude, grabbing the next, and I was just like throwing guns at people as opposed to like shooting them, and it was so much fun as everything smashes to pieces, and as you run through these environments. It's so small and contained, and it also has a very unique fourth wall breaking story that is all about like kind of hacking. And one of those things I really like is when a game forces you to like type on the keyboard, and it will just type actual words, but you just feel like a hacker just typing a bunch of bullshit. So you're just like tapping away on the keyboard, and it's writing out sentences for you that you're sending like messages to these different people, and it's all built in as if you're on a old computer with like an OS and everything, and you're like booting into different systems, and there's weird like mini games and everything. It has such a great aesthetic to it, and it has twists and surprises and does so many unique things, which I don't want to spoil because it's so much of the enjoyment of that game. But wow, I was blown away. And I think that it's one of those ideas that when you look at it, you're like, this is innovation. This is innovation in the game space that I want to see more of. And it's just incredibly satisfying. It just feels so good when you nail a sequence of taking down so many dudes at once. And yeah, it's a great game. You should play Super Hot. It's very, very good.
And I'm going to play it in VR. What's that going to be like?
Yeah, I know. You'll actually feel like the person. Like, that's crazy. I really want to do that. That's like, you're actually going to throw the gun and then grab it.
You
like,
got to come around and try it.
Do that. Yes, I want to. Oh my god. Wow.
And then have a lie down.
Yes,
from
exactly.
playing VR for 10 minutes. Yeah. But yeah. So that's your number 3, Super Hot.
Yes.
Very
yes.
Good. Right. Top 2.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2 is Night in the Woods. So those who listen to the show probably know that I love my politics. I love, I always, as cheesy as it sounds, I want to make the world a better place. I work in politics. I won't be specific about that, but I work in politics. I've got a set of views. I've got beliefs. I've got like ideas that I share that I always want to tell more people about, like, to make things better, to tell a story in different ways. And Night in the Woods conveys a message and a take on society in the most perfect way possible through the game's medium. So obviously, like music, films, there's lots of, I'm always interested in how is politics conveyed that isn't just coming out of a politician or a journalist's mouth. How is it conveyed by music, films, art? And Night in the Woods, I think, just does it in such a great way in terms of video games, because it's describing how society is. Like, society is breaking down. People are feeling poorer and more disconnected from those in power than they have ever before. And different groups on the right and the left have different attitudes as to how we get out of this position we're in. And it's unbelievable that a game like Night in the Woods that's based around horses and cats and dogs and strange creatures can actually articulate a take on some of those issues and how we get out of those issues. And it gets incredibly dark at points, but it only gets dark at points because it's just conveying that society gets really dark at points and that there are real big issues that people are facing. And I was just absolutely blown away by how well this game depicted not only the issues we have with society, but how we get out of those. Like, the breakdown of communities and towns and traditional industrial areas, both across Europe and North America especially, but around the world, and how we move on from that. And you really feel like it's not doing it in a ham-fisted way that is always so easy to do when anything does a take on something political, or here's a hot take on this, and you think, right, well, that was a really obvious political message that feels less connecting because it's so obvious and boring and done before. This game feels like it's just saying it how it is in a really subtle and plain way that is really easy to resonate with. And it's not pushing it too hard, but at the same time, it's not pulling its punches. It's making sure that it's getting its message across to you without, throwing it in your face too much, and playing a really great story through and following the character. I've forgotten the lead character's name, actually. May, I think.
Believe, yeah.
The main cat, May. She's just like, her story and everything that happens to her is a story that lots of people will share, and it's really, really, really well portrayed what happens to her and her friends and what they do about the issues that they're facing and where they are. And maybe I'm overdoing this because I am into politics, but
Yeah.
honestly, this.
No, but I think everyone has spoken to that when it comes to this, and the way that it's written as well. Just generally, I know you were going on about that when you played it, about how sharp it is in terms of its narrative.
The writing is incredibly sharp. It feels so natural and not forced. I think that's what I always feel with this game, is that nothing in it feels forced. It's just so natural. I keep repeating the same things again and again, but that's just how it is. Like, and I would highly recommend playing this game. I think it's about 16 quid on the Switch eShop, and it's obviously cross-platform. Another game that came to Switch this year that came out last year, all the years before, and number 2, Night in the Woods. Definitely need to give it a go, MBZ.
Yes, no, I will. I definitely want to play it. It's on the list. Things like Owlboy as well. They'll happen. But yeah. Great, so that's your number 2.
That's
my number 2 is, obviously, we've talked about it already. It was our other Backlog Club game. It is Final Fantasy VI, which I loved. I thought it's not quite the heights of Earthbound or Chrono Trigger for me, but it is such a tremendous game that does different things well. And I think you nailed it when you're talking about the strength of the characters in the cast and the narrative and the bonds between them. And I think it's just the variety of it and the way that first act has so many different unique flavors, where you split up the characters and you're going with Terra and then you're off with Sabin and you're going all these different places. It has different twists on the gameplay when you're splitting up your characters to take on these waves of bad guys. The environment and places you go, while I think a lot of the towns can get quite generic, I think the overworld and just the way the world has been created is this great mix of this magic and technology and the fusion between them, and how ideas of people like Celeste has been like genetically engineered, and all of that like lore building is so engaging, and it has an amazing twist, and it really has this sense of a big ensemble cast that comes together for a joint purpose. I think the thing that elevates Final Fantasy VI actually for me overall is the soundtrack. I think the music is just tremendous, and whether that's portrayed in the famous opera scene that is so classic and revered, or whether it's just the overworld theme that is one of my favorite pieces of music that I've heard generally across mediums ever. It is, and I watched this video recently that I shared with you on the music of Final Fantasy VI and how it's crafted and the simpleness of it, and yet how all those themes are so interlinked and woven together. It's just a tremendous soundtrack that gives that sense of place and urgency and like sadness. Like, so much of Terra's character is represented in that core theme that is hers, and overall it feels weird because there's almost no main character, and yet all the characters have their parts to play, and going around and finding the secret ones as well, and the way that your choices can mean that some will get left behind. Obviously, the back half of the game, I think, has some pacing problems in terms of the grinding needed to do for the end game, for the last kind of stuff you have to do. But I enjoyed the battle system so much, the fact that you have the unique elements, like obviously Sabin with his fighting moves is my favorite thing. I think that idea is so different and distinct. And I liked using a lot of the other characters as well. I used Celeste a lot and her magic abilities. Just every character stands out on their own, and it doesn't feel like anyone is necessarily dead weight from a story or gameplay perspective. Obviously, there were characters that I didn't use as much, but everyone gets their moment, like Setsa's moment when he's going down and, getting the airship, and that amazing part where you see the past of his life kind of in a background as you're walking down the staircase. Like, some real great visual imagery that they really make this game feel very, very different.
For a sprite-based RPG, it's awesome. That's so unique.
Right, and we talked about it a lot, but just the way they portray character through animation, through that finger wag, the thing that is so subtle and just makes like Edgar's character is so defined by a lot of those little things. It's great. I love that there's flashbacks and the story is just the thing that also makes it so interesting is that fusion between gameplay and narrative, where you come to some battle screens and, you know, when Terra uses magic for the first time and Edgar is just like jumping around like, what the fuck, you can use magic, this is really weird, and you're still on the battle screen as it's happening. I think that stuff is so incredibly smart and forward thinking, and yeah, it's such a well made incredible experience that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think Final Fantasy VI is indeed one of the greats. So it's number 2 on my list.
Guess we're on to the big number ones.
Yes, the number one.
Right. My number one game that I played this year that didn't come out this year is Okami HD. So Kevin Sharma, friend of the show, he gifted us this game, MBZ, and I was like, right, well, I'm between jobs right now. Let's play this game. And I beat the whole thing in like, I don't know, 5 days to a week or something.
Yeah, like 30 hours binged it.
It was really quick, about 30 hours. So it's a Zelda take, but there's a way, way, way bigger emphasis on Japanese history and mythology than I had realized before playing the game. And maybe by the fact that I went to Japan in 2017 is why I'm so into this to some degree, arguably. So the story is mad in terms of like it's a Zelda-like story, but for a Zelda story, I think it's incredibly strong. Like each environment represents different parts of Japan, and there's all these characters from mythology, like I was saying, that link together, and just some really interesting places that Amaterasu will visit, and characters that you interact with, from cities to mountains and rivers and undersea, and it's just really, really well put together. And that art style, first hour or so, I actually really didn't like the art style, but it really grew on me because I appreciated more what they were trying to do with this game. And even to the point now where I think this, other than Breath of the Wild and Wind Waker, is my favorite Zelda-like experience. And I think it easily comes in that third slot because it is taking ideas from Zelda and developing them. Like, it's got sort of little fight rooms that actually make combat more fun and succinct, I think, actually, because you can avoid those fight rooms when you're in the open world, but then when you want to get into them, and there's like a sort of level up, not a level up structure, but there's benefits to fighting that are different to Zelda that will give you invincibility the more enemies you defeat in a row, sort of thing. And I've forgotten what it's called now, but I need to go back and maybe listen to my thoughts on this game from before. But it really combines loads of elements from Zelda and the ability with the paintbrush, the ink brush, to create real life bombs and strokes and affect the real world around you in so many ways. It's almost infinitely better than a series of weapons you might get in Zelda, because it feels like your one weapon can do everything, and that feels nicer in some ways than having to worry about what you're equipping and thinking about what to bring where for this dungeon or that dungeon. There's some really epic boss fights again in this game. There's one in particular that I struggled a bit with some of the controls in terms of the ink brush, but otherwise everything was very, very smooth and it worked really well. And I just kind of, I wasn't expecting Okami to be as good as this. I thought it would be a bog standard Zelda. Sounds like an oxymoron almost, but it's kind of, I thought it would be an okay Zelda, like it'd be a good Zelda, but it's a fantastic Zelda experience and more. And it's very long. I kind of mainlined it a bit. There's definitely some side stuff I missed out on, but it's a very long game. It's about 35 hours even mainlining. So I can't recommend this game highly enough. And again, I think it's actually a pretty cheap price on Switch.
It is. It's like 20 quid on the eShop. Which it's like $15.99 or something. It's ridiculous.
And it looks beautiful in HD. Like they've really done a great job remastering it. And I would highly recommend checking out this game because it's not only a great Zelda game, it feels like a great tribute to Japan and its history, and I love that.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I will play it. I have it, thanks to Kevin from the show. And yeah, we'll get to that probably at some point when I feel like there's a bit of a breath in between some new releases, and I'll be like, yes, I'm going to commit this time, and hopefully it works out. And we know, obviously, we should eventually do a big podcast once I've beaten it, with myself, yourself, and our friend Ali T, because
Yes.
this game, out of all video games, is the one game that he has told us to play the most over the years, and we just ignore him. We're like, yeah, well, whatever, Ali T,
We'll
you
do
and a
Ali
special
T, don't
defense.
worry.
Yeah, but he's played it like 4 or 5 times. It's like one of his
Wow.
favorite games ever. I think he probably likes it more than most Zelda games. So yeah. Okay, my number 1 is a game that people have told me to play forever, ever since I played Codename Steam and was like, hey, Codename Steam's really good. And people are like, well, there's this other game that's better than Codename Steam, actually. And I bought it in a Steam sale like maybe 2 years ago for like £3.50. And I just kept putting it off. I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it one day. I should have gotten to it way fucking sooner, because Valkyria Chronicles is easily one of the best strategy games ever made and one of my favorite games I've ever played. It is tremendous. And I think the thing that makes it so unique and interesting is that blend of real time with turn-based. So the idea that as your units are running through the place that they are getting to, they can be hit by interception fire from enemies, and so you're able to make it behind cover so that you take less damage from them, and then you're able to, if you get shot at, like reply to them within the same turn and shoot them back. But it is that element of strategizing around those parts that make it so unique. So one of my favorite things that I talked about when I talked about it on the show was there's a map where there's this giant tank coming through. There's no easy way to get around to its back to its weak point, and you need to capture an enemy base that is nearby it. And so the way that I strategized around that was I took my own big ass tank, put it in front of the enemy's tank, so that when I got my scout to run through that area, which otherwise they would have just been mowed down by the tank fire, my tank blocked the enemy tank's fire, so I could just run round the corner, kill the other enemies in the base with a grenade, and capture the flag and finish the map. And that epitomizes the creativity in Valkyria Chronicles. The fact that you have so many different options with different characters, the scout who can move really great distances but is quite easy to pick off and can die in quite a few hits, but they are the most crucial character because they're the ones that will be able to make it to the flag, which is usually a lot of the maps in the original game is about making it to this one point to capture. But there's a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different objectives. It isn't just that. There's a map early on with a giant ass tank that is so much of a difficulty spike, but it is incredibly satisfying to figure out a strategy around it, like using the units like lancers, which are ones that can destroy tanks, in combination with snipers to pick people off from far away, having your shock troopers, pairing people together so that when they're next to each other they do even more damage. It's just this incredible blend of those elements of a shooter and a strategy game, but it is far more of a strategy game, and the idea that you have these kind of action points, that there's a huge amount of variety that you can decide on. Like, am I going to just focus on this one unit who the amount of movement they can do in a single turn will be reduced if I keep doing it, but I really need to take out these 3 guys with a sniper, so I'm going to put 3 of my turns into using that sniper versus moving 3 other enemies. And it ended up that on a lot of maps I was doing a lot of the work with far fewer of my units and leaving a lot of people on the sidelines, which is a valid way to play that game. And it's not just about having everyone, whereas in Fire Emblem I tend to use my entire party and make sure that everyone kind of gets an equal go of it. The brilliant thing about Valkyria Chronicles is experience is shared between the types of units. So scouts are just counted as one group, so that when you level up your scouts, every single one of your scouts levels at the same time, and they get access to new potentials and they get access to new orders and things like that. So it streamlines so much of that process, which means that you can swap units in and out, and I did all the side stuff as well. Like, there are side stories that you can do to find out more about your characters. The cast is a really lovable cast with some exceptions, but I think it's just well written. It takes place in an anime version of World War One, but it strikes a great balance between anime weirdness and seriousness. It has a great tone. I think the new game that I'm playing right now, Valkyria Chronicles 4, is not as good with that stuff. It leans far more into the like really bad anime stuff, whereas the first game was far more grounded, I felt, and I really like the relationship between characters like Welkin and Largo and Alicia, and it's just so tremendously fun to play. Figuring out strategy games, and I've found over the years that I like difficult strategy games. That's where I really derive enjoyment in them, and it's not often that I go for the challenge, but hard platformers, hard strategy games, that's where I want the difficulty to be high, and Valkyria Chronicles provides that in spades, whilst also making you feel like you're cheating it. Like, there are moments with the scouts where you can just capture an enemy base and you feel tremendous because you've just done it in such a short number of turns, and that's how the game rewards you in terms of ranking systems, how fast you're able to do something. And yeah, it's just so good, and it's available now on Switch, and the Switch port of Valkyria Chronicles 4 is really good, so I imagine the Switch port of the first game is going to be really good as well. So it's only like 15 quid. Play that game. It is one of the best games I've ever played. It is tremendous and amazing, and I cannot say enough good things about it. So yeah, that is my number one, Valkyria Chronicles.
I was going to say, we've been railing against some of the Switch prices, but there's a handful of games we've talked about that are actually really good value, just for strange reasons that I guess we don't know, but yeah.
Well, I think it's because these two games that are both our number ones are older games that are being ported to the Switch, right, and have been out for long enough to where their value is kind of dropped to that point. And it's good because it means you can get some amazing games for ridiculous prices. So yeah, there we go. That is our list, our personal top 10 lists. What should we go from here? Should we go back down through them, or do you have any other ones that didn't quite make it?
Should we just list off a few that didn't make it, and then we'll do a quick run through? There's some really good games in here that you're going to be annoyed with me. Like,
yes, I know.
Oxenfree, Punch-Out, We didn't make it. Lovers in a Dangerous Space-Time. The first Uncharted I mentioned. VVV.
Yeah, oh man,
couldn't make
game
it.
Was so good.
Severed didn't quite make it.
Severed didn't make it. Fuck, Bally, what's wrong with
and
you?
Then the one you're
Severed was like my number 3 game last year. Fuck, that game is so good.
The one you're going to be the most annoyed about is Inside.
Oh, you son of a bitch. You suck. God damn it, Bally.
It just, this year was
just didn't resonate with you as much, did it, Inside? Oh,
no, I mean, not compared to the games in my top 10, but there's a lot of strong number 11s. That's my strongest number 11 list by a mile.
Yeah,
though.
That is crazy.
So yeah, were there any that kind of didn't quite make yours?
There are a few for me. Ollie Ollie 2. I love Ollie Ollie. I think Ollie Ollie 2 is still really, really good. It's more of the same, which is why I didn't put it on the list, because I think I tend to favour more new experiences generally. Yeah. But it's great. It's really amazing, and Ollie Ollie is just one of those series that I find such satisfaction in. It feels so good. It's one of those complicated systems to get your head around control wise, but once you do, there's such a flow and fluidity to it. Rive, which is a game that I played the end of last year in December, which wasn't eligible for my top 10 last year. I really wanted to put it. I was so close to being on the end of this list, but I just edged it out with Dragon Quest 1, which I don't know. I think Rive is one of those games that I don't think I would naturally gravitate towards, but is such a fun experience. It's so weird. Like you're like this drone, and it's like a shmup, and like there are elements of like Metroid to it and platforming, but it's so much fun, and I have great memories of listening to Giant Bomb Game of the Year last year while playing Rive, and you should check that game out because it really got underlooked and is probably quite a good price on the eShop as well. It's so much fun, great shooter. And then I don't like Devil May Cry, the original Devil May Cry, which I played for the first time, which I thought was really neat. It is not a game that I think is great and hasn't aged amazingly, but I really like going back and playing some of those classic games like I did with the original Prince of Persia on GameCube, just to get a sense for everyone revered this game back in the day. What is it like now? How does it hold up? It was just really interesting to play that game that I thought was a very good historic experience for me, which I like to do from time to time. It's like, let's be a video game historian and go back and see how this game holds up and what it was doing for its time. And you can see so many elements of like Resident Evil in it, and the way that Capcom was trying to make it this level-based game, and it's actually kind of a more open structure to the castle. It doesn't really quite fit into it. It's kind of like they've jammed a square peg into a round hole almost with Devil May Cry, but I think it's a very interesting experience. I think that's pretty much it for the ones that didn't quite make it.
Well, shall we run through our top 10s then?
Yes.
Right.
Would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So my number 10 was Axiom Verge. Number 9, Super Meat Boy. Number 8, Contra 3, The Alien Wars. Number 7, Final Fantasy 6. Number 6, Overcooked Special Edition. Number 5, Owlboy. Number 4, Hollow Knight. Number 3, Uncharted 2. Number 2, Night in the Woods. And number 1, Okami HD.
Very good. Mine is at number 10, Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior 1. And number 9, Shantae Half Genie Hero. Number 8, Punch Out Wii. Number 7, Super Mario World. Number 6, Castlevania Portrait of Ruin. Number 5, The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Number 4, Contra 3. Number 3 is Super Hot. Number 2, Final Fantasy 6. And number 1, Valkyria Chronicles. So yeah, I would say like the top of my list is pretty damn strong overall. I think your list is just overall very damn strong.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a really good year overall for some old games, and yeah, I've enjoyed going back and getting to some of those classics. Finally, I've been waiting to play Final Fantasy 6 for fucking ever.
Yeah,
it
the
took
SNES
so
Classic
long
was
to
a
get to
real
it.
nice way of playing those games that I guess we've been meaning to play for a while.
Absolutely, and it worked really well. So there you go. That is going to close us out for the show today. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, obviously next time we're going to be doing a much more heated debate of what are the top games on Nintendo platforms for our joint top 5. And obviously you can send in some emails as well. Where can they send those emails to, Bally?
Please send your suggestions to thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. As MZ said, yes, next time is games of the year that came out this year on Nintendo platforms.
Absolutely. And we're also going to be doing some stuff on our Patreon with our next Patreon exclusive episode for December, which is going to be games that didn't come out on Nintendo platforms, but that did come out this year, because now Bally has a PS4, so that we can chat about some of those experiences. So if you want to go over to our Patreon, it's patreon.com/thisnintendolife. And we would like to thank some of our patrons as well.
Yes, thank you to our sponsorship level supporter, patron, I should say. That is Daniel V. Thank you so much for your support. And our two $10 tier patrons, they are, of course, Atari, Alex, and my girlfriend, Caroline. Thank you for your support as well. And yeah, as MZ mentioned, next week on TNL Ranks, it's going to be a joint combined 5 of top 5 games of the year that didn't come out on Nintendo platforms. So yeah, that'll be, I guess, the second pillar, and we've tackled the first pillar. Next week's second pillar, and then in 2 weeks' time, the regular show, top 5 games of the year that came out on Nintendo platforms. And yeah, I should mention that episode next week, TNL Ranks. You can get all episodes of TNL Ranks for $2, including the episode coming out next week. So you won't want to miss that.
Absolutely. You can find us in so many places over the internet. You can find our Twitter account, which is at TNL Podcast, which has links to our Discord and our YouTube channel. You can find me on Twitter at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN 91. I tweeted a nice picture of an early Christmas present from Caroline.
Yeah, fantastic Star Wars jumper.
A Hoth Christmas jumper.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's very, very cool.
Go check that out.
Yeah. All right. And you can find the show in various places. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on any podcatcher that you have. You just download us, subscribe to us, give us some review. That'd be a nice Christmas present that we kind of mentioned last time. We'd love to get some more reviews and written up. So if you have the time and you like the show and enjoy it and want to hear some more, please do that. That really, really helps us out and makes things great. I think that's pretty much it. Anything that I've missed, Bally, that we need to close out with?
Just here's to next year, when we'll hopefully create another 10 incredible games that came out that year that didn't come out that year. That's not that year. That's not even happened yet. That's what.
Yeah.
That's the.
And I feel like I need to do a bit more classic digging. I didn't do as much of it this year. I want to go back and play some more old games.
A lot of new games this year. Maybe fewer new games next year. We'll see. But they just come out of nowhere. There's a lot of games we've played this year that we weren't anticipating.
Video games are cool, man. Video games are cool. There's a lot of amazing things happening. So yeah, that is pretty much that. And we will see you in a couple of weeks' time for final episode of the year. So thanks everyone for listening. Continue to listen, and we will see you then. Bye bye. The musical interlude used on today's show was Lifelight from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Copyright Nintendo 2018.